Call the meeting order. This is the August 12th, 2014 meeting of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission of the Town of Fairfield. The first item on our agenda is the meeting minutes from July 22nd, 2014. Everybody have a copy of that in their packets?
Who's voting tonight?
So we have Commissioner Francis for Commissioner Niley and Commissioner Corcoran for Commissioner Kennelly. Sorry, just give me one moment. Now, has everyone had a chance to take a look at those? Can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Jacobson.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Calabrese. Any discussion? Comments, questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The minutes are adopted unanimously. Item number 2 is a new application to recommend a public hearing. It's a zoning regulation amendment, application of 85 Pond Mill LLC to amend section 21.2 with regard to seasonal farm markets.
This, some of you may recall, approximately a year ago or so, the Fischel folks made a request. I believe it was Cinch Market was looking to do a seasonal farm market over at the Sportsplex, and while an intriguing idea, the Commission ultimately determined that it was not a permitted use within the zone, and so they are now returning with a proposal to allow a regulation amendment that would permit seasonal farm markets within the Design Industrial District. It is a regulation amendment, and of course, that does require a public hearing.
Thank you. Have a motion?
I move to bring it to public hearing.
Motion by Commissioner Jacobson to move to public hearing. Second?
I'll second it.
Second by Commissioner Calabrese. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously. Next item is old business. Zoning and subdivision regulation amendments. Application of Berwick Fairchild and Associates LLC to amend sections 10.6.13, 10.7.1, 10.9.3, 10.11, 10.12, 10.13, 10.17.3, 28.6.1, and 31.2.42 of the zoning regulations. Public hearings were on 4/8, 4/22, 6/10, and 6/17/2014. We have until August 21st to decide. And I think, we had a number of hearings on a number of these items. Why don't we just take a roll to confirm that those here voting were either at the hearings or reviewed the tapes so that they can vote.
I was at all the hearings.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman?
I caught up on the missing tape.
Thanks.
6:10 as well.
Okay. Mr. Calvin?
Yep, I'm all caught up.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I
Go
missed
ahead.
one and I caught up.
Good.
I'm all good.
Mr. Alessi's good.
I attended all the
Good.
hearings.
I missed one and I watched.
Thank you. And so did I. I was at all the hearings. Very good. Thank you. Mr. Wett?
Mr. Dubacek,
First, I'm just going to give you an overview of pretty much what you just explained. As a matter of fact, if you look at old business B and C, they are all included in this application in front of the Commission. As mentioned, it's three components basically to this. The applicant is requesting a zone change of property, a zone regulation amendments of our subdivision, our zoning regulations, and a coastal management review. The proposal is to demolish an existing two-story, one-family dwelling at 110 Berwick Avenue and a one-story structure which has been used as a neighborhood social club at 145 Fairchild Avenue to construct a new elevated three-story multifamily apartment complex. It's to be elevated over parking and access story. The total floor area proposed is 33,901 square feet. The building height will be 45 feet. The building will consist of 33 bedroom dwelling units, offering 39 standard parking spaces and 2 handicap spaces beneath the structure. As the chairman mentioned, there are a multitude of zoning amendment requests as part of the application. I won't read through those specifically, but essentially they deal with sections having to do with our small unit enhanced set-aside development section, height requirements, coverage in bulk, minimum floor area, the number of bedrooms in our section 1017.3, and parking, of course. And that rounds off pretty much what the amendments are being requested. Again, when we go through Jim goes through the staff report, he'll highlight them a little more specifically. And as I mentioned also, there is part of this a zone change application for 110 Berwick and 145 Fairchild Avenue to establish a design residence district on land that's presently zoned Residence B. The sequence of action on this essentially would be reviewing the zone amendments, then, of course, the zone change, then ultimately the special permit application. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wendt, and he'll go over the staff review and report, having to do what was presented to the commission.
Okay. As Joe had mentioned, this application has 3 components to it: design regulation, or zoning regulation amendment, a zone change from Residence B to design residence district, and a special permit and coastal site plan. As this commission well knows, under 8-30G, an application, the decision on the special permit or the site plan component is not dependent on the other elements of the application. In this application, the regulation amendment seeks to amend the design residence district regs to allow 66 bedrooms per 0.45 acres in developments qualifying as a small unit set-aside development, eliminating the requirement for frontage on a major collector road, limiting the number of units to 33 units in a single building, reducing setbacks to 10 feet on the street, 4.5 feet on the side, and 3 feet on the rear. Other proposed amendments include increasing height to 4 stories and 45 feet, increasing lot coverage to 55% of the lot area, and to 167% of the total area of the lot for floor area. Requirements for unit size and number of bedrooms are also proposed, and parking is proposed at 1 space per unit. The application proposes, among other things, an unprecedented density of 147 bedrooms per acre, with setbacks as little as 3 feet with all the parking space, with 1 parking space per unit. This is proposed to accommodate a 33 two-bedroom dwelling units on 0.45, less than a half an acre of land, in order to establish 10 units of affordable housing. The Commission is familiar with another 8-30G development currently under construction, which is directly across the street on Fairchild Avenue from this proposal. That application was approved through a settlement. The development under construction is 54 one-bedroom studio units on 1.49 acres with 68 parking spaces, or 1.25 spaces per bedroom. By way of comparison, the pending application proposes a bedroom density that is 400% higher than that of the 8-30G development across the street. The bedroom per acre measurement was used in this comparison, as that is the density measure proposed by this applicant. It should be noted that the Commission, in considering this current application, is not bound by the parameters of an application filed by others, or the parameters of a settlement that has been reached with another applicant through the appeals process. However, the comparison is offered because the proximity of this applicant's proposal to the development which is presently under construction across the street is they are essentially abutting neighbors. They utilize the same street for access, and the impacts of these proposals would be cumulative on the neighborhood. It should also be noted that the parameters of the Fairchild Garden Homes project, which is the one under construction across the street, was given consideration by the Commission in part because the number of affordable housing units proposed in that development exceeds that required by 8-30G. More specifically, that development includes 15% or 8 units set aside for very low-income families in addition to the minimum number of units prescribed by 8-30G. The record in this matter includes a report from the applicants, on the applicant's proposal from the Greater Bridgeport Regional Council. It in part states that the proposed amendments to the Design Residence District allow for significantly higher density and lot coverage, which could ultimately impact the water quality of the Rooster River and Long Island Sound. Thus, the proposed map changes and zoning text amendments could have a potential impact on the Greater Bridgeport region. That's the quote. This is a significant statement, especially in light of the proposed affordable housing development. A protest petition was received regarding the proposed zone change. In a review of that petition and calculation of the area represented was conducted by the staff. The owners of more than 20% of the area of the lots within 500 feet are represented on that petition. Therefore, a 2/3 vote or 5 affirmative votes would be required to approve the zone change component of this proposal. The staff report on the coastal site plan application indicated a concern for evacuation during conditions of flooding of the nearby Rooster River. The Commission received testimony and photos for the record concerning past flooding events. There is no doubt that this development will flood from time to time. This site is situated within a 100-year flood zone boundary. It is designated as a special flood hazard area by the National Flood Insurance Program, which is managed by FEMA. The area is defined as the area that will be inundated by a flooding event having a 1% chance of being equal or exceeded in any given year. The Town of Fairfield's Engineering Department has been studying the threats of flooding in this area for years. Storm events combined with the adjacent Rooster River have resulted in flash flood events. Examples of these events in April of 2006, in August of 2012 are described and submitted incident photos in this record. The record also includes 9 incident reports describing response activities which required wide-scale response from the police, fire, public works, and utility companies between 2006 and 2012. An April 2006 storm required the evacuation of 30 to 35 people. The flooding caused hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage to approximately 60 houses. A testimony in the record from the police chief was that Fairfield's only death by drowning occurred during a flood on this street in April of 2006. As reported in an article that was April 26, 2006 Fairfield Minuteman newspaper. This is the principal reason why the structure is elevated. However, even though the building is raised, the residents would still need to be evacuated and vehicles on site would need to be moved in the event of a flood. The applicant has engineered a detention and infiltration system which only accounts for the additional water that will be generated by the addition of impervious surfaces, but the system that is being installed does not reduce the risk that the property will flood. There was also much discussion regarding the impact of this development on traffic delays at nearby intersections with Kings Highway, which is, as this commission is aware, is a very busy street, with 2 lanes in each direction. The traffic report indicates increases, particularly for left-hand turn movements, leading to potential delay of up to 3 minutes as represented by the models used in the applicant's traffic report. Based on testimony that states when vehicles are parked on the street and are also queued at a stop sign at Kings Highway intersections, the road width would be 1.5 cars wide. The Commission challenged the applicant's traffic engineer, Mr. Galante's comments that the roadway is safe and that a car can enter Fairchild and Berwick Avenue approaching the right, from the right or the left on Kings Highway. The Chief of Police referred to queuing at the stop signs on both sides as creating blockades for emergency apparatus getting down the street. For example, Mr. Galante stated that 1.5 car widths will absolutely allow right or left turns onto the street. And the Commission has to weigh the credibility of that evidence in the testimony that they heard. Town Traffic Study Safety Unit Representative, Officer Frank DeMarco, stated that based on review of the plans and site visits, extensive street parking already exists, subject to residential density that exists on Berwick and Fairchild Avenues. Traffic volumes based on the traffic study for the proposed development could pose a potential hazard for emergency vehicles to travel to both Berwick and Fairchild Avenues. Vehicles could potentially be stacked at the intersection, preventing emergency access. Mr. Galante told the commission to disregard his report, in which he acknowledged that the road was over capacity. In the commission's experience, Mr. Galante has always told the commission to rely on his reports as accurate. However, Mr. Galante requested the commission to disregard the report and instead rely on his traffic count that was prepared between public hearings. In between hearings was unreasonable because the traffic count was only done for one day, for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. Mr. Galante was not present to answer the commission's questions despite the meeting for June 17th to specifically accommodate his schedule. He did not even consider pedestrian vehicle conflicts, take those pedestrian vehicle conflicts into account, and dismiss the concern that there are children or pedestrians who use the street for travel because there are no existing sidewalks. The town traffic engineer, Mr. Hurley, said that the applicant's reliance on the ITE trip generation was not reliable because the numbers reported were only based on one project, not on the local area. Mr. Hurley said that in his professional opinion, the nationwide rates identified by ITE fall short of the actual numbers experienced in this area for trip generation. By using more conservative or realistic traffic generation volumes, the delays will become larger than predicted in the applicant's traffic report. Mr. Hurley said that the proposed development does not contain enough parking. With 33 two-bedroom units, the 41 parking spaces fall short of what will be needed. This amounts to less than 1.25 parking spaces per two-bedroom unit. Based on general local knowledge, existing conditions for apartments and condos in the area, and referencing a recent housing development traffic report, this development should provide more parking or reduce the density to account for the parking that can be provided. The record for the current proposal included much discussion and photographic evidence regarding on-street parking existing on both Fairchild and Berwick Avenues, as well as repeated flooding. In a staff email of April 8th, in the file points out in supplementary testimony for the record by others, including the chief of police, support the fact that existing land uses, many of which predate zoning on the two fronting streets, results in heavy usage of on-street parking. Such parking makes it challenging for emergency vehicles to access the neighborhood. The proposal would clearly increase the need for on-street parking, which would exacerbate this issue and may potentially eliminate the ability for vehicles to turn around at the end of the respective dead-end streets. Both streets on which this proposal fronts are dead ends. This is a public safety issue that is directly connected to the number of parking spaces proposed. The proposed 41 spaces for 33 two-bedroom units is likely to result in additional parking in the street. The town's engineer's report indicates his opinion based on local conditions that the proposed number of spaces is inadequate. He also points out the lack of truck access under the building due to low clearance. This condition could further cause congestion in parking and circulation issues. The applicant could argue that only one needs to look across the street for a comparison of proposed parking. The development under construction across the street, as noted earlier, contains 68 parking spaces for 54 bedrooms proposed, or 1.25 spaces per bedroom. Applying the same ratio for the proposed project would require 82.5 spaces for the 66 proposed bedrooms. Conversely, calculating the number of bedrooms based solely on the number of parking spaces results in 32 bedrooms. However, given the existing traffic congestion, the fact that these streets are presently over capacity, the public health and safety concerns would not be ameliorated simply by reducing the number of units based on this calculation. Reducing the number of units even further than this would provide additional parking on site for residents and their guests, minimize the need for additional on-street parking in the neighborhood, provide for greater access to the building, which would be smaller, by on-site by emergency vehicles such as fire, police, ambulance, and other EMT vehicles, and reduce the number of people and vehicles that would need to be evacuated in the event of flooding or other events of emergency, which are known issues that will repeat over time, given the development is proposed to be built in the FEMA flood zone known as a special flood hazard area. Section 28 of the Fairfield zoning regulations outlines parking regulations for multifamily housing, specifically for applications with affordable units, to be at 1.5 spaces per unit. Even this applies to developments, however, of much lower density of 15 units per acre in this zone. At that density, the applicant could build 7 units. Applying the 1.5 bedroom calculation for the number of parking spaces proposed, which is the most they could get on the property, is 41 spaces, could support 27 bedrooms, a much higher number than would be allowed under our regulations, but justifiable to support the affordable housing plan proposed. As the Commission is aware, the legal standard applicable to this application, filed pursuant to 8-30G of the statutes, is that if the application is denied, the Commission has the burden of demonstrating, based on the evidence in the record, that the decision was necessary to protect the substantial public interest in health and safety, that such public interest clearly outweighs the need for affordable housing, and that such public interest cannot be protected by the imposition of reasonable conditions of approval. The Commission needs to find whether or not there is sufficient evidence in the record to support a finding that the proposed development would pose substantial risk to public interest in health and safety. The increase of traffic and inadequate on-site parking and the threat of flooding as described above create these risks. That those public interests outweigh the need for affordable housing, and whether or not there are reasonable conditions of approval that can be made to protect those public interests. It is recommended, therefore, that the proposal be denied in part and approved in part with conditions. An application subject to 30G site plan can be approved without zone amendments or zone change approval. We propose that the regulation amendments should be denied as time, experience, and responsible planning for contemporary future conditions, given the proposed density, does not reasonably indicate the need for the proposed amendments and zone change. It has been demonstrated that the proposed level of development permitted by the proposed changes would not serve the health, welfare, and safety of the neighborhood. The proposed changes would permit a level of development that would increase undue traffic congestion. Based on the above evidence, an approval with conditions is recommended for the special permit and coastal site plan portion of the application with the following conditions. That the number of bedrooms be reduced to 27, which is 13 two-bedroom units. The number of parking spaces shall be what is shown on the plan as 41. The applicant should provide to the Commission with an evacuation plan for approval after submission to the Town Planning and Zoning Director, Police and Fire Departments for their review and comment. The Commission will consider the comments by Fire and Police in its review of the evacuation plan. These conditions are necessary because a reduction in the number of bedrooms will reduce the number of cars traveling to and from the site, as well as reducing the need for parking on site. Therefore, a lower number of bedrooms will ensure adequate and available parking on site and reduce the level of spillover onto the street or elsewhere because of an inadequate number of parking spaces. Laura's turn that wall, please. Thank you. Stand by. While simply reducing the parking requirement at the level that was permitted for the Garden Homes project seems to create parity, it does not account for the likelihood that reducing any required parking will actually create more congestion and unsafe conditions on the street. A reduction in the number of bedrooms proposed will also lessen the number of cars that will be needed to be relocated during a flood event. Additional conditions would include the vehicle clearance under the building be increased to a height of 13 feet 6 inches to facilitate delivery vehicles, trucks, and emergency vehicles. The project engineer shall certify in writing that the project will result in a zero increase in the base flood elevation as required by the National Flood Insurance Program regulations. And of course, a bond should be posted to secure site improvements. That concludes the report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. White. So before we get into any discussion, we should have a motion. We should deal with these items individually. So we have 3. I read the first item from the agenda. The second under B is the application of Berwick, Fairchild and Associates to establish the Design Residence District. and the third is the special permit and coastal site plan application. The review that you just read dealt with all three in one staff report, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, very good. So Commissioner Alessi,
Make a motion under the zoning and subdivision regulation amendment to deny.
okay, so under item 3A,
3A in our,
with respect to the zoning regulation amendments, Commissioner Alessi's made a motion to deny,
I'll second that.
second by Commissioner Jacobson. So any discussion on the item? Commissioner Barron?
If I could just mention, what you want to highlight on this is what, in your deliberation, if you remember in the report, we listed the three findings the commission must review, that having to do with time experience with reasonable planning, contemporary future conditions, given the proposed density does not reasonably indicate the need to propose amendments to zone change. If you agree with that, that would be one of the reasons for your denial. It has been demonstrated the proposed level of development permitted by the proposed changes would not serve the health, welfare, and safety of the neighborhood. And the third finding is the proposed changes would permit a level of development that would increase undue traffic conditions. All those findings are based on the statutes that enable this commission to approve amendments of their zone commission.
and I'm going to base my denial based on the staff report, what was listed in the staff report.
So Commissioner Alessi, your motion is to,
Deny this zone change based on what was reported in the staff report.
and the findings that were proposed by staff.
Correct.
Commissioner Jacobson?
Yes, that's
You
fine.
adopt that amendment?
Yes.
All right. Very good. Thank you for the clarification. Anyone like to speak first?
Commissioner Barron? Yeah, I mean, I agree with Commissioner Alessi and Commissioner Jacobs. There's no justification at all for these zoning regulations, other than to specifically allow this application to conform to its own set of regulations. It's just a series of section changes specifically to this project, and I see no need to adopt these changes. There's no justification for their applicability to anything that we want to do in our planning function or with affordable housing. So I agree with the reasons for denial in the staff report.
Thank you. Mr. Jacobson?
I agree, there is no justification. I think it sets a bad precedent, there's no need for it, and I will support the denial.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah. Well, I agree. I'd like to thank staff for the analysis and the report and the recommendations. It was a lengthy hearing. We have a lot to consider here tonight. This is the first of three. And with regard to the amendment regulations, there are some specific findings that we need to make that are pretty significant, not just for this proposal, but in terms of amending our regulations for our town. And this is not something I think that we should be considering. With regard to density and affordable housing, we do have our Affordable Housing Commission that is active and working on revisions to our affordable housing plan. And so this is not something that I think we ought to be adopting. So I will also support the motion. Anyone else? We ready to vote on this item? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention? So the item carries unanimously, which is a denial based upon the staff report and the recommended findings in the staff report. The next item on the agenda is item 3B, which is the application of Berwick Fairchild and Associates to establish a designed residence district on land presently zoned Residence B. Commissioner Alessi?
Mr. Chairman, I also make a denial on 3B based on the staff report and finding this fact as well.
Commissioner Alessi has moved to deny based upon the findings and recommendations in the staff report.
Do you have a second?
You want to articulate something specific?
Do you have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Commissioner Calabrese.
Okay. Yeah, essentially the comment's the same. The statutes that enable this commission to approve zone changes to the districts. Specifically outline these types of findings that the commission need to make. And again, they're the same ones. I won't read through them again, but they have to do with the time experience, the demonstration having to do with health, welfare, and safety, and also if the proposed zone change would create the kind of development that will increase undue traffic congestion. Again, all those. The other thing also that would be part of your motion here is because you did deny the amendments to the zoning regulations, the current site plan would not be consistent, or the zone that you're proposing would not permit the development to be there. So that would be, I would offer a fourth reason for the denial of the zone change.
Fourth reason for denial that's not presently in the staff report.
Well, right, I mean, it's
Yep.
essentially that you've denied the zone amendments, so
Right.
therefore, the change of zone to the design residence would not, there would nothing in there that would support the development proposal.
Right. Commissioner Alessi, would you like to amend your motion to include?
I amended to include the fourth one listed as far as the site plan goes.
All right. Commissioner Calabrese?
Yep, I accept it.
Okay, thank you. So the motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Anyone? Well, with regard to this one, I'll just say that I think the record is clear that the proposal, as was described to us, would increase traffic congestion. And, I mean, that as a standing alone is a basis upon which to deny that this, this request. So, I also support denial for the reasons in the staff report. Anyone else? The motion is to deny, so an affirmative vote is to deny. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. The third item is 3C. That's 110 Berwick Avenue, 145 Fairchild Avenue, special permit and coastal site plan application of Berwick Fairchild and Associates LLC pertaining to a 33-unit residential building with affordable housing pursuant to 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes. So we don't have a motion. You want to wait for a motion?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
All right. Commissioner Alessi?
Mr. Chairman, as far as 3C goes, I make a motion to approve with the conditions that are listed in the staff report, which are the following. The number of bedrooms proposed shall be reduced to 27, which is 13 two-bedroom units. The number of parking spaces to be provided shall be the applicant's proposed 41. The applicant shall provide the commission with an evacuation plan for approval after submission to the town planning and zoning director, fire and police departments, and for their review and comment. Commission will consider the comments by fire and police in its review of the evacuation plan. Number 4, the vehicle clearance under the building shall be increased to 13 feet 6 inches unobstructed to facilitate delivery vehicles, trucks, and emergency vehicles. The project engineer shall certify in writing that the project will result in zero increase in the base flood evaluation as required by National Flood Insurance Program regulations, and a bond shall be posted to secure the site improvements.
Could I also ask that you consider including the specific findings?
Well, I said and to include
And-
1 through 6. The staff report and to include 1 through 6, what was found in the staff report.
So your motion is to adopt the staff report as a commission statement
And to include 1
and to include the commission findings?
Exactly.
Okay. And with those conditions of approval. All right. Do I have a second? Second by Commissioner Francis. Discussion? Commissioner Corcoran.
I guess I'm concerned that the reasons in the report for denying the zone change and the residential district change, and the arguments brought up for safety, to me, I'm not sure that they justify allowing any building here. So in other words, the same arguments that apply to not allowing the level of density that was proposed, I think, apply to the level of density that we've got in our proposal here. I don't see anything distinguishing the two. There's still more traffic, there's still flood, there's still pedestrian problems. And when we look at the traffic report, one of the things in there was that the waiting time for the original proposal was as high as 3 minutes. That turns out the standard level that that's in, the level of service is level F. Level F is for 50 seconds of waiting time. We're talking about 200 seconds, so we're talking about 4 times the level that's considered to be a traffic jam level. If you look at the differences between A, B, and B and C and D, those are differences of 5 or 10 seconds or 15 seconds to progress from no wait until traffic jam level. We're looking at going now 4 times as long as the traffic jam level. I don't think that's, to me, that's not a good thing. Another thing with the level of service is that it states for the pedestrians that there's a high risk of dangerous behavior for pedestrians when the level gets above 45 seconds for a waiting turn. I mean, I'm not seeing that this proposal brings those down into safety range. That's about what I have.
Right. So the numbers that you just recited were those in the applicant's traffic report?
Yes,
Were
they are.
based upon 66 bedrooms, 33 two-bedroom
That's right.
units. The weight would increase from 50 to 200, but the concern is that the reduction in the number of units doesn't go far enough. Do you think the arguments would apply to deny it altogether?
Yes.
Commissioner Calvert?
Yeah, I'm going to agree 100% here with Commissioner Corcoran. I don't think the revised conditions here are going to meet the safety and health issues. I think I'm deeply concerned putting another large unit in there with this many cars and people is just going to cause a safety issue, and I'm not comfortable with that.
Commissioner Jacobs?
I agree with Commissioner Corcoran and Commissioner Calabrese. I think that, I know the staff worked hard on the conditions, but I just think that it is still a very, very unsafe area and a condition, and I will vote to deny.
Commissioner Barris?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'm ready to, and I had a lot prepared, but a lot was said in the applicant's report, so in the staff report, so I don't want to belabor it. The one thing I do want to talk about, just a little more detail, is the traffic report, which I think the staff said a lot about, Mr. Corpus. Just because I do believe that the level of delay is unsafe, but I want to talk some specific things that we heard during the hearing. First of all, I mean, I looked at this a lot. A lot of reference was made to the 2011. We can't look at this without the other. I mean, as the staff said, there's a development right across the street that's built, that's a huge traffic generator. Going from 50 to 200 it's actually 74 to 200, as Mr. Corker said, is not just because of this development, it's because of the other one too. So you have to look at one in light of the other. Now, the original traffic report on the 2011 application had the current no-build delay, afternoon delay, at 75 seconds. The traffic report we got from Mr. Galante had 74. 3 years apart, 2 different traffic engineers, very comparable numbers. The build on that was, let's say, 160 seconds. I think Mr. Galante's, his no-build, which assumes that the Garden Homes development built, is 143 seconds. Again, comparable. And then the rest of it is due to this particular application. So I just want to get clear the components which make up that 200-second delay. Now, that is an unprecedented delay. The staff said that in a memo to us as part of the record in April, and I can't recall a single application in the town of Fairfield that had that great a delay. I asked Mr. Galante about it during the hearing, whether he could recall a single traffic report that he had done for Fairfield, and I'd say he's done well over 100 for Fairfield. Maybe it could be 200. I mean, he's been doing this for years. And his resume is very impressive. That had that great a delay. And his comment, well, I think there were some in other towns that had a bigger delay, but he couldn't recall one either. On every other application, this is something Mr. Wagner said. Mr. Galante says you have to look at the data. You have to use the model. It's unprecedented that he would try to throw that out and go back for 2 hours, come up with a number that doesn't even have, again, the key components of the delay are not what's there now, it's what's going to be built. And all of a sudden, like, you know, ratchet down that delay by a huge factor. I think that the data initially presented was so bad, you knew we had to come up with something else, and I do not find this method credible. We always use the model, we're always told to use the model by Mr. Galante. The new observation is based on 1 day for 2 hours, and under any scenario, the current delay is about 36 or 37% of what it would be when both developments are completed. So, you know, I really think that we have to use the model, as we said, and the traffic reports we've been given. So I think there's a significant delay. There was a lot of evidence presented by staff, by the police department, by Chief McNamara, with a concern for safety on the street based on accident history. That's another thing we didn't talk about, accident history. The applicant said there was 5 accidents. The police department said there was over 100 accidents. This isn't all along the post road or all along Kings Highway. This is between 500 and 800, a fairly narrow stretch in the immediate area. So I'd be concerned, I am concerned, and I think it's a legitimate safety concern, that a 3-minute delay in that area, where we've got testimony from the chief of police and members of the police department and the town engineer, that they have a serious concern for safety in this area based on accident history, the observed history of a dangerous parking condition, and the ability of first responders to get down the street. I think there is a legitimate safety issue there. I know I'm just reiterating what we're saying now, but I think it's important to get that on the record. And I don't find the second report of the traffic engineer to be credible. I would also, I think we have to go with the original report. I'd also say that all this was delivered before we heard from the public, and the public included the chief of police, and the testimony of Mr. Chief McNamara, Engineer Hurley, and Officer, I don't have his title right, but his name is DeMarco? Frank DeMarco. They were never rebutted. During rebuttal, the applicant said they just stand by the traffic report. So for these reasons, I find traffic to be a significant issue. I find parking to be as or even more significant issue, but I think I'll just confine my remarks to that at this time, just to talk about why I see that as a serious issue.
Commissioner Alessi?
You know, I'm not saying anybody likes this thing, but you have to remember, this is an 830G application, okay? And harmonizing the area is not a good enough reason to deny this application. And this will come back to court, okay? And I just want you, if you're going to deny this application, to keep in mind what the reasons of denial are in an 830G application in regards to the state legislature. So, not saying that I don't like it because I don't like it at the bottom of the street is not good enough for an 830G application. This isn't a normal office building or apartment building that we're dealing with here. This is an actual state statute that we're dealing with. And we have to take that in consideration in our vote. And that's all I have to say on that.
Well, Commissioner Alessi makes a remarkable point. For us to deny the application entirely, we would have to find that the public health, safety, and welfare issues outweigh the need for affordable housing. And there are no conditions that we can fashion to the approval that would ameliorate those public health and safety conditions. So that here we have a site with ingress and egress on 2 streets. The applicant proposed an overhead which was less than 13 feet 6 inches. 13 feet 6 inches is the standard for safety equipment to flow under a building and to have access to a building. So one of the conditions of approval is to raise the building to an unobstructed 13 feet 6 inch overhang. I think that the staff report went through an analysis to try to accommodate the public health, safety, and welfare concerns, which I haven't even talked about how I feel about them, but I agree with all of the findings that were in the staff report in that regard, but then tried to fashion a series of conditions which we could impose to accommodate some affordable housing on the site. I do think that it's important to, if we are to further consider this, that we make, as part of our motion, specific findings with regard to the applicant's traffic engineer. I agree entirely with the comments that have been made, and particularly Commissioner Barrett's, with respect to the credibility of the applicant's traffic engineer with respect to both his original report as well as his second report. You know, there were substantial questions raised by us in the applicant's presentation when he was going through the initial report. His data and conclusions were rebutted, I believe, very effectively through testimony and submissions by Police Chief McNamara and DeMarco, as well as the Fire Chief Fellner. We specifically tried to schedule the additional public hearings for the applicant's rebuttal remarks during the summer, so that Mr. Galante, the applicant's traffic engineer, would be back so that we could ask him questions about the disparities in the data and the analyses. And he was not here. He didn't come. There was some discussion on the record that night about him having been and had to leave. But, you know, that is deeply troubling to me. And I think it's important that we make a specific finding in terms of our weighing of the testimony and a finding of credibility when we make our decision here. So, you know, I spent a lot of time with this. We all did. We had lengthy public hearings. There's a lot here in the record. A denial of this application would have to be based on our finding that there are no conditions that we could impose which would overcome the public health, safety, and welfare concerns that we're finding. So you suggest, Commissioner Corcoran, that reducing it from 66 bedrooms to 27 may not give us enough in that regard, right? And I agree in some respects that we're at a disadvantage because the applicant and the opponents and so forth all had the ability to have site plans analyzed and traffic reports assessed and data counts, etc. You know, we're trying to address this in the context of the information that we have, and part of that is our town plan and our zoning regulations. And part of our zoning regulations do include a ratio of parking versus density. And so I think that the staff report was trying to strike that chord, that balance, in order to carry out our obligations in weighing and assessing the evidence, and also fashioning conditions of approval that would be consistent with our obligations under the state statute. You know, it is trouble, but that's, I think, a little bit more background and information from my perspective as to what our burden is and what our task is. Commissioner Corcoran.
What I'm seeing, though, and I understand everything you're saying, what I'm seeing, though, is that the number that we're picking for the acceptable number of units, I don't know why that number is better than another number or better than 0. Three things occur to me. One is that the existing conditions for parking and for emergency use aren't good at all. And the other complex hasn't even opened yet. So it's not like how much can we add to it. I think the answer may be we can't add any parking to those streets. Secondly, the flooding is not going to change, whether it's built or not built. And there's going to be problems with how do you get people evacuated from there? How do you get emergency vehicles down there in terms of the flood? And that's not going to matter about how many people are there. The third thing that occurs to me is that we're supposed to weigh this against the need for affordable housing. And we haven't talked about what the weights are there. You know, we know what the safety side is. We know that maybe we have some safety problems here, but we haven't looked at the other side, which is the need for affordable housing, I don't think. And what I see there is that we have a town that has affordable housing mentioned in our regulations. We have an affordable housing commission that is proposing new ways to increase affordable housing. And I think that that's part of the weighting on the other side of that, about what the need for affordable housing is. You could say the town is doing absolutely nothing, in which case the weight of affordable housing would be 0. But we're not doing nothing. We have plans in place, and I think that there is that these safety issues, I don't think should be incurred, or the safety problems incurred, given that we do have an affordable housing plan.
Commissioner Francis?
I had comments about parking, traffic, and flooding, but they've all been very adequately covered by the staff report. The one thing I would say is similar to Mr. Corcoran's, that we cannot study the build-out and the occupancy results of the adjacent apartment building to determine how the flooding and traffic situation will change, all because that facility is not completed, and that does bother me a bit. But both sides to it.
Yep. Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, I'm going to talk now specifically about what Mr. Corcoran said, and I'm really not sure if this, I have some troubles with this also. I understand the burden, and we have to have reasonable conditions. The thing I'm struggling with here is, are these reasonable conditions, or is this a new plan? When we say 13 units, you're talking about, okay, the need for affordable housing. Well, what would that be? When we get an affordable housing application, it's supposed to say, this is what it is, this is how many units. Just by my math on 13 units, you would need 2 of them to be at 60% for the median income, and 2 of them there, so you'd be getting 4 units. Again, this is me making an assumption. We don't have a plan in front of us. We have a proposed condition about the level that might be acceptable to the commission. And I'm struggling with this because this kind of thing this is unprecedented also. What would it look like? When we say we would allow 27 bedrooms, what would that look like? I mean, are we really asking the applicant to come up with another plan, and we're saying about the level? Now, I do agree with one premise from the report, that the only way to approve this is anything generated by that has got to be kept off the street. Anything. I mean, I realize there could be an exception where somebody's on the street, but for the most part, the parking at that site, given the fact that there's another approved site across the street, given the testimony about flooding evacuations, cars have been destroyed there as recently as May of this year. It's a serious problem. I don't think we can have any spillover on the street. And I think the staff report does say that. Why the reduction is necessary. It reduces the need for parking on the street, reduce the level of spillover street. I'm concerned we shouldn't have any spillover on the street. Now, if this development is built, and it's self-contained. People go in, they park there, emergency vehicles can get in, and we have less of a safety argument. We really do. Then the whole argument is, what would the delay be? And then my answer to you, Mr. Corcoran, is we don't know. Same thing. We know that it's about 150 seconds or so, including the development that we've already got built there. And instead of going to go up to 200, it would go up to something less. But we really wouldn't be approving it without knowing what that would be. Could not tell you. It's probably somewhere between 100, but we don't know. We don't have a traffic report for that. We don't have a site plan. We don't know how it will be laid out, and that's what troubles me about this approval. I do agree that we can't just deny it just because we we don't like it, or for any of those reasons, we don't want anything at the end of the street. If it can be demonstrated that the traffic would be contained to the site, then I could support the report. But I'm struggling with approving something where we spent 4 nights on a plan, and now we're just, putting a number out there. I think it's reasonable. I think the staff arguments for doing this are reasonable, but I'm just not sure. So I invite you all to convince me.
Well, I mean,
To convince me that we should approve this application, giving 13, I mean, maybe the applicant doesn't want 2-bedroom units
well,
anymore.
that's their decision, okay? That's not up for us to debate whether they want it or not. I don't think we can condition an approval on all of the parking for the site has to be on the site. It's a public street, right?
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't know that we can find that out. We don't have a plan in front of us. We have a report where we think that's achieved, that's all.
My understanding of our burden is that if we can fashion some conditions of approval, which would relate to density, number of units, number of parking spaces, safety issues like height of the building, access, and all of that's our burden. Now, there's nothing that I've read that would give us the site plan, the traffic report on the new conditions, we don't have a new affordability plan, for example, like, that would include these things. Those would all have to be part of, a new proposal, which would have to be fashioned based upon the conditions of approval. But, so we have a parcel of land, and there could be some level of development here, right? It's just not 66 bedrooms. So, where do we go with that?
Can I make a couple more points and I'll
Yes,
stop?
please.
Okay, well, one is, another flaw I see with the plan, one of the members of the public brought it out, is the applicant, I see it, as I read the statute, didn't identify which units would be initially affordable. To me, they're supposed to do that. There was no schematic, no narrative, nothing. They just said, well, it would change over time. But to me, the burden is on the applicant. An 830G application is supposed to comply with the law. You're supposed to say which ones would initially be offered as affordable. So now, not only didn't they do that, it wasn't clear who would be responsible for administering the affordability plan. So I saw that as defects in the application. If we approve an application for 13 units, we're just assuming 4 will be affordable? How do we know that? Which ones will they be? I mean, it seems tough to approve something.
Well, to that end, I think that if we were to go forward, I think you're right, we should make an additional condition of approval, a revised affordability, a revised plan would need to be submitted. That would need to be acceptable, right? So I think that's...
Yeah, I would need to see an affordability plan that actually spells which units were affordable, and we need to see a revised plan, yes.
Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt. Keep
No, that's
going.
it. That's it. That's what I did. I said I found defect. I actually found that as a technical defect with this application, which is sufficient by itself to deny this application. So now we've got, I understand the justification, and I just not sure it works. And again, I think there's and even just something simple, like, I mean, this is not picking on the staff by the math, like, we're approving 27 bedrooms, or 13 units. Which is it? 27 is an odd number. 13 two-bedroom units, we're telling them that they can have 13 two-bedroom units, that's 26. Or are we telling them they can have 27 bedrooms, which they could come back with a plan for 27 bedrooms, 27 studios? Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what would be acceptable.
Commissioner Leslie.
In the 830G, is that necessary in the statute that they have to show which ones are deemed affordable and do that?
Well, at the initial offering and the affordability plan, yes.
So I think the question is, do they have to specify which units on the site plan are designated as the affordable units? Or can they do what I believe they argued their plan does, which is to make them first in, first last out kind of thing and rotate them around, such that they will always have the requisite number of affordable units. They just won't necessarily all be the same units.
Right.
And they suggested that that was a benefit to those renting the affordable units because they would be, the same units on the same
Yeah,
par with the other
Right.
a full freight. Market rate.
Right.
That was their argument.
As I understand their plan, there's not a distinction in the units themselves. All the units are identical, so it's just a matter of what rates they're offered for rent. It's a little bit
Yeah.
different than when you're selling the units. When the units are offered for sale, you have to identify the initial units are going to be offered for sale as affordable units. On a rental scenario, what this is proposed is that they have to maintain that same number of units, but it may, as tenants come and go, that could fluctuate. But I don't know that there's a distinction here because, as I recall the project, I don't believe there's a distinction in the unit types. In some projects,
No.
the affordable units are different. They might be modestly smaller than the market rate units.
I would think the key to that also in the practical adjustment of the units is if a person is renting a unit and meets the affordable requirements for the amount of salary they have, if that goes up, they cannot be ejected from that apartment. What happens is that apartment no longer meets the requirement of the affordability plan. They have to produce another apartment that does. So that's why there needs to be some flexibility in the plan. Again, it has to be specifically outlined in the plan, but to actually identify the units at the moment of application to this board is really not, they could do that, but they would not necessarily be the units.
It's not required.
I think it is.
No.
As I read the statute, it is. I understand at this point you say, well, they're identical. It's not a 200-unit thing where there's all different
Right.
shapes and sizes, but it is required.
You have the statute?
Yeah. Initially, yeah. I think I have it. I thought I had it. Let me look for it again. Yeah, here is the statute right here. And it's the affordability plan is supposed to consist of that.
Right.
That's from with section 126 of the statute. That's not. I understand the argument. I'm saying if there's
Well,
supposed
it's not
to.
an argument, it's just the
Yeah.
practical adjustment is.
So, I'll just read then from section 830G.
Seven.
Yeah, it's,
This one right here.
yeah, but I gotta get the right citation. Section 830G-7. Little a, number 6, in an affordability plan for a set-aside development, a description of the projected sequence in which price-restricted dwelling units will be built and offered for occupancy shall consist of a narrative and schematic plan describing the construction sequence of the proposed site development plan, the location of price-restricted and market rate dwelling units within that sequence, and a demonstration that such sequence will result in compliance with the set-aside requirements of Section 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes and Sections 830G1 through 830G11, inclusive of the regulations of Connecticut state agencies. So, I think the issue there is with regard to the sequencing.
That's what was described to the commission as an explanation for why they can't identify specifically what the units are. They must guarantee that there are those units, but there is a sequence because of, basically you got human beings living in these units that their salaries may increase.
The requirement is that initially, the plan is supposed to say, these are the 30 units, these are the 33 units, and these are the 10 that are affordable. Initially, realizing that it'll change if somebody's thing goes up. I understand that, I'm saying that initially.
And they didn't.
They didn't.
I recall the testimony being that they will make that determination as the units are completed, and not identify them specifically initially. And
It's
so-
required that they sooner or later have to produce that as part of their plan.
Well,
Question is,
I
the
guess
time of
my-
application.
My point is that if I was approving, I would much rather approve a 13, what is it, a 13 unit or a 27 bedroom plan and see that plan and see which ones are affordable.
well, I mean, that could be, yep. So again, I think that is, rather than a condition for denial, it's something that they could
They could do. They could do that.
and submit for approval. I mean, there have been some, I think, some good issues raised in terms of possibly amending the motion, which would include, a revised site plan, a revised plan of affordability,
Traffic report.
a revised traffic report, but all sort of tailored around a much smaller scale, consistent with our staff analysis regarding congestion, parking, public health, safety, and welfare issues. But I haven't resolved myself one way or the other with regard to Commissioner Corcoran's comments in terms of, the numbers being what they are. Commissioner Corcoran?
So, is one of our choices then to put in a condition saying you have to reapply?
Well, it's not,
Isn't that the same as just denying it?
it's not a reapplication, but, I would welcome some guidance from staff here.
Yes, I would as well. We deny it without prejudice.
Couple things. One is just to refresh them, I don't have to, but, and it's mentioned a couple times in the report that under the 830G application, the decision of the special permit or site plan component is not dependent on other elements in the application. There is no question that if someone was going, regardless of the 830G, if someone was going to apply the Mendon regulations in the way that it was proposed here, would absolutely create a situation that would be negative to the findings that we've listed. You would not want, the zones would not handle based on the commission's review and interpretation of the information.
In terms of the zone change and the regulation changes have already been denied, though, right?
The 830G situation, which you're getting an education over the last year or so, and maybe to go to Mr. Clark, one of the things he says, how do you determine what the level of, when you talk about health and safety issues must outweigh the need for affordable housing? We don't define that. There's no question that Fairfield's always been known, especially where it's located in the state of Connecticut, as being very pro type of housing for affordable and other types. The definition is in the statute. It says that if you do not have 10% of your housing stock, as they define affordable, then you are thrown into this bucket of review under 830G that you have to support this burden of proof that's over and above our zoning requirements, regulations, or plans of development, or any other type of affordable housing activity the town is. That's the problem. It's the problem with the statute, in my opinion. But that's what it is. They define that. It's 10%. We're at 2.33%. So we don't even come close to that. I don't know that we could ever get there. The point being, though, is that's, just to answer your question, Mark, that's what the level is. nothing else that the town does other than trying to meet that as far as the state's concerned in that. So with that said, your decision now, really it comes down to what you all been talking about. You have been presented an application and outlined to you what the concerns of health and safety are. Specifically, they're basically traffic, density, parking, and the flood-proneness of this area. What was offered in the staff report is really, and the number wasn't pulled out of the air. It's somewhat similar to, if you look at the report that was identified in this report that was submitted to the commission by the town traffic engineer, Bill Hurley. He gave you a percentage of parking spaces per units that exist right now in town. The 1.5 that the chairman mentioned, or that's in the report, that comes out of our design residential regulation. What basically we tried to do is identify, if you were going to approve this with conditions, what kind of number in the reduction could be justified by something consistent with our regulations. Other than that, it would be just pulling numbers out of here. Now, if the 13 units and the number of units doesn't work for you, if you still feel the evidence that was supported and submitted to the commission creates a health and safety issue that overweighs this need for affordable housing, then of course, you must deny based on that issue. That's really what it comes down to. And that's what the statute asks the board to do, and that's what you have to feel comfortable with. Regardless, the reality of the world is that either action we take is going to be appealed. And that's when this record and your decision and your discussion is going to be weighed by either compromise or by some judge someplace. That's really the long and short of it, Mark. And that's really, Mr. Chairman, that's pretty much what you're looking to deal with here. So what's offered to you is an adjustment based on some consistency that exists in our regulations, but there is no question that even with the adjustment, it isn't consistent with any development or any regulation that we have would permit this type of development in this area. Really, because the statute takes that out of play. What the statute says is you have to weigh it on this health and safety issue, and it overweighs this need for affordable, which is defined by the state. It's 10%. So about as good as I can do, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Nguyen?
I don't have a whole lot to add, other than procedurally, I think there's some agreement as to the health and safety issues that are laid out in the report. The question at hand is whether the proposed conditions ameliorate those concerns, the point that the need for affordable housing justifies the reduction in the numbers that will satisfy the off-site parking. If you think it does not, and then there aren't any reasonable conditions that you're comfortable attaching that addresses that, then I think you deny the application. And as Joe mentioned, then the applicant is going to likely appeal. But during the course of the pendency of appeal, they have the right to make a revised application. They're not required to do so. They could, based on what they're hearing, take their own shot at revising the plan, submitting a new affordability plan and a new site plan that attempts to address the health and safety concerns that you have identified. So you are, it sounds like there's some common agreement onto the findings as to public health and safety issues, but what you're not reaching consensus on is whether or not the number of the conditions that we've laid out ameliorate those concerns or not.
Yeah, I mean, I would generally agree with your comments. Commissioner Corcoran?
I don't think we have the expertise to determine what the safety conditions would be at a reduced level. If that's what, if we think that's acceptable, then I think we should ask the applicant to, if they want to reapply at that level, to tell us how the safety issues would be different.
Well, if I may, I think what the result will be is one of two scenarios. An appeal that with no revised application, in which case the court will determine whether or not the findings of health and safety are enough to outweigh the need for affordable housing, period. Or revised application will be submitted to try to find some middle ground that the applicant and this commission could be comfortable with. But there's no requirement that the application take that step, and you cannot compel them to do so.
Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, struggling with this still. Maybe I'll ask the staff this question. I mean, I'm not comfortable with approving something that's vague or non-specific, and this is. Condition 1, the number of bedrooms proposed shall be reduced to 27, which is 13 two-bedroom units. Is that deliberately vague like that? Are we trying to give some applicants some flexibility? Why don't we just condition it to bedrooms or units? But to me, the number of affordable, when we measure the need for affordable housing, it's in units. Why don't we just say it can only be 13 units and get rid of bedrooms? I'd feel more comfortable with that.
He's trying to be more specific, actually.
Yeah,
That's-
I understand it's based on the bedrooms, but you know, when we measure it, and again, that's what I'm struggling with here. I mean, when they say they have to lay it out, we should really, if we're getting this as a new application, we would need to know, this is this many units, and this many are affordable, and these where they are. We're just assuming what it's gonna be, so, I would feel more comfortable we were just conditioning the number of units, which is how this all gets measured. And my understanding, Mr. Corcoran, is exactly what staff said. It doesn't even matter, we're at 2%, we could be at 9%. It doesn't matter, as the state measures the need, if we're not there, we have a need for affordable housing, and it's just that against the safety issues, which realistically is truly a subjective assessment in terms of the need for affordable housing, but they take that out. The fact that we have a committee, it's great that we've done a lot of stuff, it's great that we have a lot of housing that the state doesn't count as affordable, but realistically is, including this neighborhood. But the fact is that we can't say there's not a need, because as the state measure is, there is one. So I'm just a little uncomfortable with the language there.
It was not meant to be vague.
Okay.
If anything, it was meant to be more specific, but you can make any adjustment you want to.
Yeah.
I'd feel more comfortable if it was just 13 units, because that's how they measure affordable housing, not by bedrooms. I mean, when right? I mean, that's what the statute says. It says 30% of the units need to be this. Now, we got off on bedrooms a lot because this application has, you know, and I think it's a fair comparison to the other one. It has 33 two-bedrooms, is what the application we're weighing. The one across the street has 42 studios and 12 one-bedrooms. I mean, it's not illogical to say, well, that has more units, and they're also having 27 affordable units. This proposal had 10. I mean, it pales in comparison to the application that's directly across the street. As the staff said, it's 400 times the density in terms of bedrooms
So,
per acre.
what you're saying is you gotta say 13 units.
I would feel more comfortable saying 13
And
units.
they built 3 or 4 bedroom units?
13 units of not more than 2 bedrooms.
Well, okay, that's fine, but I'm just saying, you don't understand what I'm getting at, though.
It's, okay, the language here is that the bedroom shall be reduced to 27, which is 13 two-bedroom
I could say
units.
no more than 13.
Yeah, well, I would be more comfortable
No more
saying
than 2 bedrooms.
the applicant shall be reduced to 13 two-bedroom units and stop there.
That's,
Commissioner Jacobs?
I just have a question. If we had 13 two-bedroom units, how many affordable units would they be required to provide? I mean, four out of the 13? Okay.
Here's my concern with that, Mr. Is that will you just say that it'll be reduced to 27 bedrooms, that they come back with something that's 27
no,
bedrooms?
that's not my concern. If you listed, you say 13 units, you come back with 3 bedroom units.
You could say 13 one or 2 bedroom units. You could
That-
13 units of
no,
no more
I
than
don't
2
wanna,
bedrooms.
I don't wanna say 13 units and leave it at that big, that's
Right,
what I'm
okay,
saying.
no, I agree.
I mean, now you get into sort of units and density again, and sort of, you know, overall size of the building, because, you know, those units could be, and this is not something that was addressed in the staff report, and we've not talked about it, because the proposal now includes, you know, a certain number of bedrooms, but they are a certain size because of the restriction of the layout of the lot, the size of the lot, how they have to get the parking in there, and so forth. And, you know what I'm saying?
I understand, but you know what, if you come back to,
50,000 square foot building.
if you come back with the same size building, we're right back where we started at, with the number of people based on the number of bedrooms.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense what he's saying as far as the number of bedrooms.
Okay.
No, it's, yeah,
Did
I tend to agree with you.
Oh, okay.
I'm sort of articulating it, that it could present, you know, an issue that just gets blown up again, you know?
Like
You know
you
what?
said, with no more than 2 bedrooms in each unit.
Yep,
That's fine.
that's fine.
Commissioner Calvert.
May I?
You've been
All right,
having your
so,
tongue over there.
I've been trying anyway. The bottom line is what we're arguing over here with these possible conditions of approval is 4 affordable housing units, okay? We're talking 4 affordable housing units. I still do not think that putting hundreds of people in danger for 4 affordable housing units is worth it. We had our chief of police stand up here and tell us the current conditions on that road are unsafe. It's over congested down there. They can't get emergency vehicles down there now. We've lost 1 life down there, and that's 1 too many. There's nothing being addressed with this flooding. The drainage, nobody's talked about the drainage tonight. There's already a drainage issue. Over 1/3 of the town drains out over there. That's what we've been told. The applicant themselves said, yeah, there's not much we can do about the drainage, and how there's a drainage issue there, and that 1/3 of the town drains there now. Adding another apartment complex down there is just not going to help it. I think, based on everything we have written here in the staff report, proves that the health and safety is a huge issue, and that shouldn't be overlooked for 4 affordable housing units.
Which you believe outweighs the need for affordable housing.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Leslie.
You know, I just want to be known that when the complex was proposed to us across the street, and we denied it, and I remember voting to deny the one across the street, we had to go to court, and we had to go before a judge. And he said, why did you deny it? And we said, there's no parking on the street. The street floods. A lady died. A lady drowned on that street. The judge said to me, said to us right in front of us on the commission, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I want you to keep that in consideration with this now. I agree wholeheartedly. It's sad. It's crazy. It's a bad street. It's congested. It's flooding. I get it. The kids walk on the street to go to school. I understand that. But the judge said to us, I know she died. It doesn't make a difference. It floods. It doesn't make a difference. Go to court, you're going to lose. It doesn't make a difference. He kept telling that over and over and over again. So, you know, I'm looking at this one way because of that, and being on the commission when the one across the street was built, and denying that one. So I think, you know, bringing these numbers down to a reasonable number for the lot makes more sense than, you know, I hate to say this, but if you go through a denial, like staff said, like Mr. Devanchik said, when Mr. Wentz said, and you deny it, and the judge says to you later on, it doesn't matter, and 66 units are built on this street. I want you to keep that in mind. That, you know, I just want you to realize that's a good possibility of that happening when this, you know, if this gets denied and goes to appeal. The judge is going to say again, she died, it floods, there's no parking, I get it, it doesn't matter. And I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind when looking at it. I'm not saying I like this application. I just want you to know, though, I've been to court before. I know how this plays out. And this is how it goes. And this is how the state sees it. And this is how the state sees it in every town. It's not just Fairfield. You've seen the list of cases that have been fought in court, and you've seen the towns that have won and the cases that have lost. And this is one of these examples where this could happen, where if we deny this application, we're going to go to court, and the judge is going to say to us, and it's going to be the same judge, it doesn't matter. You're going to build 66 units on that street. I just want this commission to keep that in mind.
Commissioner Paul.
I'm wondering if the quality of the documentation we have of safety issues is an issue before the court.
The quality?
Yes,
In what sense?
the documentation there that we have in the record.
Well,
We also
I
have
mean, this
increased
record is
expert.
different. Okay, so I would say that, you know, there are differences between this record and the other record.
Right.
Okay? You know, it's not strictly apples to apples, okay? You know, I was also on the commission when we handled the other application as well. You know, we didn't have a traffic report where the applicant basically disavowed his own traffic report. We didn't, in this application, we have, you know, Chief Fellner,
Right.
who provided testimony with respect to the fire and safety issues. We had opponents to the application that were represented by counsel that submitted legal arguments and memoranda, which were not present in the other application. So there are differences, but Commissioner Alessi's comments, I think, are should an attempt to sensitize us to the burdens that we are under with regard to the state statute, which is what I had tried to articulate, you know, when we first started talking about all this, and the obligation to assess the public health, safety, and welfare issues, and then try to see if there are reasonable conditions of approval which could enable us to provide for some development with a level of affordable housing. And then you get to the, you know, the other side of the spectrum, which Commissioner Calabrese articulated very specifically, which is that we don't think that there are any conditions, in his opinion, which would outweigh any conditions that we could impose that wouldn't
Right.
outweigh the need, right? So he did for a complete denial. So, you know, that's where we are. And you know, we probably ought to be doing something here fairly quickly. I just don't know that, well, I don't know that the motion that's presently on the table is one which, maybe we ought to talk about, you know, amending the motion as opposed to voting on the motion that's been presented.
Well,
But I don't know what the amendment, I don't know how people feel about what the amendment should be.
I don't know, do we request a new traffic report if we make an amendment?
Well,
I mean, what good is that gonna do? It's not gonna do any good.
I suppose, can the amendments, can the conditions of approval require the applicant to submit a new site plan, new affordability plan, a new traffic report, et cetera, based upon certain criteria which we find are appropriate conditions of approval?
In my opinion, that is effectively a denial in basically asking them to resubmit the application. You
So how
you
then-
can't compel them to resubmit the application.
Yeah, no, but so then how then do we know what, I mean, in
Let's say we knock the unit stackers down to 13 units. I mean, a new site plan is gonna have to be submitted at some
Of
point.
course, they're going to have to submit a new site plan to do that. But you have the traffic, what this analysis is based on is primarily the off-site impact of the lack of parking. As what you've heard before, I mean, the overall delay at the intersection was an issue that we went down the road on the previous application and didn't really carry the weight, as Mr. Alessi has indicated. So we looked at this more from an off-site impact on parking, and it's more of a parking analysis. Yes, there's a reduction in traffic volume that comes along with that, but it was primarily focused on the off-site impact of parking. I don't believe that you can condition an application upon, I mean, it would require the submittal of a new site plan that addresses your conditions, but I don't know what a traffic report does for you, because that's not a condition, that's, you know, what then happens if you don't like the traffic report that ensues?
Yeah,
Then you ultimately have denied it, so, effectively, I don't believe you can do that.
Okay, what about this submission of a new site plan? I mean, I guess one of the things that, that's just come up is, for example, if we said, okay, the number of units shall be X, well, then they come back, the site plan that they ultimately submit is for that number of units, but they're twice the size of what had been previously, or the building is completely out of proportion. How do we deal with that?
Well, you can articulate that. I think you've already had a little bit of that discussion with the clearing up the ambiguity of the number of units rather than number of bedrooms, say, 13 two-bedroom units. I mean, if you're concerned that they would be enlarged, you could just add to that of
Similar
the same
proportions.
size as was originally submitted.
Yeah, right,
Same size square footage.
yeah, I think similar proportions or substantially similar proportions to that which was proposed. I think that probably would work. Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, I don't think I said it very eloquently, but I think that's the key thing that we're trying to do here, is to keep the cars off, we can't keep every car, but to keep the cars off the street. So this ratio, this analysis, 41 spaces for 13 two-bedroom units, will be adequate in general, that's an adequate parking ratio to say that the traffic will be confined there. That addresses those issues.
Right.
It doesn't address the traffic, but you could just say it's got to be less with less units, and that's what that is. I agree, you can't condition on the traffic report. I'd like to see it conditioned on the new site plan, and again, that's why I'm struggling with this, because the new site plan, I mean, if they wanted to go forward with this, a new site plan could be, things could be situated differently. I mean, just for the sake of argument, we're saying it needs to be 41. Well, if 13 units are similar size to the 33, the building could be small.
Well, that
In
was
which
the
case
point.
they could
That
have...
was actually one of the points raised in the staff
Yes,
recommendations,
yes.
is that by reducing the number of units, you are reducing the scale of the building, which will enable access and emergency vehicles, better access to the building. It would fewer number of people, which would also alleviate the evacuations when necessary, et cetera. So that was talked about.
Those are good arguments.
in the staff report.
Just the flooding.
But there is some logic to the numbers in terms of the delay that Commissioner Corcoran's talking about. I mean, the anticipation is that the delay will be about 150 seconds when the other development is completed. And the estimate was that it would be about 200 for this proposal at 66 bedrooms with 41 spaces. So, if you're pairing that's about 50 seconds that was added. And if you're paring down the number of units from 33 two-bedrooms to 13 two-bedrooms, it's about a third. I think the relevant calculation could be that it's not 50-second increase, it's about a third of 50 seconds, which would be, what about 17, an additional 17 seconds or so. So, and I think that, if you ask Mr. Galante to do that, he would probably tell you exactly that. Well, I plugged it in the model, it's this number of bedrooms, it's this number of cars, this is what the trip generation says it's going to be, and it's just a simple sort of math in that sense. I don't know that. He didn't say it. But that would be my presumption. I'm struggling with this. I really am, because I think that, frankly, with this application, with this record, we ought to be thinking in terms of conditions of approval and a substantially reduced number of units to accommodate the various issues that have been well articulated in the staff report. But I've also been, listening and hearing, everything that's been said tonight. Not just listening, but hearing. you know. So,
you've got a motion at present
yeah,
to approve with some suggested conditions.
yeah.
I don't know that this is going to make you feel any better, but from the applicant's perspective, an outright denial or an approval with the conditions that are articulated here are probably, from their perspective, largely the same result. And they're either going to revise an application and submit it to you, or they will not.
Well, you know, I can't presuppose what the
Yeah.
applicant, what's in the applicant's mind. What's in my mind is whether a possible reversal results in a 66 unit, a 33 unit construction as opposed
Right.
to 13.
That's the possibility in any action you take, whether it's to condition the approval and reducing number of units or deny it outright. That's
Right.
gonna be
And-
something
and-
we have to deal with anyway.
Yeah. So, Commissioner Barrett.
I would propose we amend the staff report again, subject to your discussion. Not, this isn't going to be a long thing, but just that if we were going to adopt this, I'd like to say the first sentence, something like first condition, the number of, the number of units shall be no more than 13 with no more than 2 bedrooms per unit.
13 units with no more than 2 bedrooms in each unit.
Yes.
Of substantially similar size
Yeah,
than was
of
originally
substantially
proposed.
similar
Similar
size and
size, yes.
proportion to that which has been proposed.
That would be, to me, a bit more specific. I don't know whether they'll like it or not, but to me, it's something that's more agreeable to do. It's less vague. And then I'd like to see obviously, a new site plan and a new affordability plan. I mean, we're just making this for 4 units, so we just did that calculation. We need to see how many units will be affordable and which ones they'll be. Again, we don't know. You know, we have one plan which says.
Well, they want to make the amendment to show 4 units as affordable,
Yes.
minimum of 4.
Minimum, well, I don't say, yeah.
Can we get it?
They,
Well, you can make a minimum of 4.
the law requires.
The law requires a minimum of 4.
Yeah.
Yes, the law requires 30% of the units to be affordable, so 13 units would be 4 affordable units.
Yeah. 2 of them would have to be affordable to 60% of the median income, and 2 of them would have to be,
Right.
because it's 15 and 15 and 30%.
Right.
But we don't have to make that as a condition because it's state law.
Right, I think I'd like the new affordability plan showing which ones they are.
Right, they'd have to show the plan identifying those particular units.
Yes. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Neither.
Maybe it is.
No.
So we don't need a new site plan?
We need a site plan too, yeah.
Well, we don't have to submit one anyway, but not for our approval,
Right.
right? Or does it have to be by our approval?
It's got to be approved by somebody.
Well, you're approving it, if you make this motion, you're approving the plan subject to those conditions.
But what about the site plan?
It's like, well, if you have a specific issue on the site plan, other than we're assuming the building is going to be smaller, footprint's going to be, depending on how many floors it is,
Are we changing this so substantially
Yes.
that we ought to deny it?
Yes.
I mean,
well, again, it boils down to whether or not you think these conditions address the health and safety issues that have been identified.
yeah, so, right. Yeah.
I mean, you can say that a revised plan shall be submitted indicating,
Yeah.
and then the list of conditions that have been articulated.
Lowered it, yeah.
Commissioner Corcoran?
I think based on what Mr. Wentz said about what the likelihood of the applicants pursuing such a reduced plan is something that's interests me at this point. Well, I'm just considering a different view of it.
Say again?
The idea, as Mr. Wynn suggested, that reducing the project to such a much smaller scale may change the applicant's view on whether they would want to proceed or not. So looking at what might happen in court versus what we might end up with. I'm beginning to see the other side of this now.
Okay. So we started down that road, I think, a little bit with conditions. Commissioner Jacobs?
Either way, applicant's gonna appeal. So I just think at this point, with a new site plan, with a new affordability plan, that we ought to deny it and have them start again.
Commissioner Galloway?
I know you couldn't see me there. I'm still in support of denial of this application. I, again, don't think that there's anything that we can currently add as a condition that's going to make this plan work for us or for the town. I think we've done our part as far as proving that this is a huge health and safety issue. It's all on the record. It's going to be appealed regardless. We've been down this road before, but I think we did our job, and that's how we should vote.
All right.
I think
Mr. Francis?
I think the new criteria are reasonable, and I would support them.
Meaning an approval with conditions
Yeah.
for the scale down.
Yeah, it's a bad site, flood bothers me enormously. And I'm concerned that the other unit isn't built and occupied, and we can't have a really accurate traffic study and flooding study. But realistically, I think it needs to be supported.
Well, so we clearly need some other motion on the table than the one that's there now. So it's either going to be condition approval with conditions, which we need to go through, or a motion to deny. If we have a motion to deny, then there will need to be some sort of revised. I think that the commission statement that we need to adopt needs to be articulated. I mean, that's a different, to my mind, it's a different animal from what we have now in front of us that we could adopt with certain amendments and modifications here and there. I don't know. What do you think?
Two comments on that. If there is, depending on what your motion is, if there's a motion to approve with conditions, I think I have captured some re-articulation of those conditions as has been discussed. On the other hand, if the motion is withdrawn and there's a motion to deny, I don't know that you need, I think you stop at where the staff starts making recommendations and end at, where the findings, where the litany of issues from the record that has been identified, and you end with that you find after discussion that there's no reasonable conditions that can be made to address those concerns.
One of the things that that I think we need to consider is that in an approval with conditions, we are requiring certain things to be changed in the plan to accommodate for the affordable housing plan, as opposed to a denial in which the finding is that there are no conditions which would outweigh the need for affordable housing, and that I don't know that there is support in the staff report that goes in that direction from what we had in the record in terms of support for that finding, that there are no conditions.
The only comment I would have there is I don't know what else to produce. We didn't write this report, at least I didn't. The intent for this report was not to make a decision either way. It was a recommendation based on these facts.
Understood. But it
The
was
fact that we had recommended or outlined a possible condition of approval still doesn't change the report. basically what you've been saying is, thank you very much for that recommendation, but based on the report, we don't think those conditions ameliorate our problem with health and safety.
Yeah, I mean, there is that paragraph where
Yeah.
you start by saying, that, you know, there could be an argument that one need look only across the street, and then following that, you know, but given the existing conditions and all of the stuff that, you know, is recited above, we don't think that would ameliorate the public health and safety
Again, all this
concerns.
report is a review and an outline of a possible action. It's your call.
Yeah. So,
I think you can do either one. The information now.
okay, comments? Anyone else? Commissioner Corcoran?
Is there any reason why we're asking the applicant to be locked into two-bedroom apartments?
Well, because that is what they proposed. And it's a great question, because, you know, we're trying to fashion, or staff and our collective conversation here is trying to fashion some conditions of approval which could ameliorate the public health safety conditions, and what changes would we make to the plan in order to accommodate that. The plan was for two-bedroom units, so that's the vernacular in which we're talking.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any better explanation for it than that. I mean,
Just to be consistent
yeah.
with the application.
Also, there was only a certain amount of parking he could develop, and
I
it
mean,
1.5 spaces per unit.
The property is only so
Yeah.
big. I mean, it's less than a half an acre. I mean, the setbacks are 3 feet, I think, right? 3-foot setbacks. So the entire, less than half an acre is a parking lot. I mean, it's taking less than a half an acre and turning it into a parking lot and then putting a building on stilts. I mean, that's what it is. They can only fit so many parking spaces on this land. Based on those number of parking spaces, is there a number of units which would, you know, provide for some level of affordable housing to condition the approval on? I mean, that, I guess, you know, they're not getting any more parking out of this space. That's it, you know. So, I mean, I don't like it either way. Right. So, somebody have a suggestion?
I have a suggestion. I think, procedurally, it's a suggestion. I think we should stand with, if Mr. Less is okay with the motion to approve, amend it if you want with some of the things we talked about, you know, maybe more specificity on the units, but whatever else you think was amended, and vote up or down on the approval. I think that's better. If it's denied, there's enough reasons articulated in the record that we'll be able to articulate a collective statement of why it's denied. I mean, to change the motion now to be a denial, somebody's gonna have to start, you know. I think we've talked about it all in light of this last hour and a half. So I think we should vote on that, amend it or whatever. I think, that's my thought.
No, I mean,
Or
I
you
don't.
can withdraw it and vote for denial.
Yeah, I'd rather,
I don't know that we have to do that.
You'd rather vote,
Procedurally.
you'd rather,
Procedurally what?
I don't know that we have to vote on a condition, on an approval with conditions, simply
No.
because that's the way that we've been talking about it.
no, I was just suggesting, I didn't say it would have to, I say that to move it along, we have to vote on one thing. You made the motion, Mr. Alessi.
Okay.
That's it's your motion. Yeah. You know, so,
What are your thoughts? I don't know if I have 2 hours of thoughts.
yeah, no, I know. The thing that really troubles me about this is that, and we've said it in many different ways. Commissioner Corcoran said it first, but in a slightly different way. There isn't evidence in the record which would support our finding for a specific number of units, one way or the other, having been reviewed by an engineer to say X number of units would be safe, you know, or the like.
So with that-
So it's a challenge.
With that then, I rescind my motion, and I'd like to make a motion denial.
I'll second that motion.
So, procedurally, I guess Commissioner Alessi is entitled to rescind his earlier motion? Yep?
You have to vote on that.
Well, if whoever made and seconded the motion agrees to rescind it,
Yep.
it's rescinded.
Commissioner Jacobson?
It was,
Did you? No?
I didn't second that one.
Commissioner
oh,
Jacobson?
yes, I agree.
No, it was Commissioner Francis.
No, I'm sorry, Commissioner Francis. Okay, so Commissioner Francis agreed to the rescission of the original motion, and Commissioner Alessi's now made a motion to deny the application for the reasons, and adopt the staff report as a commission statement.
That's fair, yeah.
And
Yes.
finding that there are no conditions that
Conditions. Not
that
just
outweigh, that can ameliorate the issues of health and safety that have been articulated.
And at this time, we can't come up with an exact number of units based on, we don't have conclusive data at this time.
I'll second that.
And Commissioner Calabrese seconds that motion.
I didn't hear his motion. Oh, I didn't hear what he said at the end.
Okay, at the end, it was that,
At the end, we can't come up with an exact number of units based on, we have insufficient data at this time.
insufficient information to, okay. Any additional comments or discussion? Are we ready to vote? Okay. The motion is to deny and adopt the commission statement as the staff report and recommendations as a commission statement, but modified to the findings that we discussed, right? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? The motion to deny carries unanimously. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing. We'll take a 5-minute recess so we can reconfigure the room. Call the meeting back to order. Next item on our agenda is a public hearing. We have three items. For those members of the public that are here, the applicant will have an opportunity to give their presentation, after which the members of the public will have an opportunity to take the podium and speak. There's no time limit. Just keep your comments germane. Getting a little bit of a late start here tonight. Like to try and finish all the items on our agenda tonight. The applicants are all here and waiting patiently, so no time limit, but let's just keep the comments to what they need to be. After the public portion of that, the applicant will get the rebuttal, they'll have the last word, and then that hearing will close and we'll go on to the next one. So the first is 1150 Post Road, special permit application of Vincente Buren, architects on behalf of David Ives, proposing a garage addition in the Center Design District. Anyone here on this application?
That'll speed things up.
Wow.
There was one
That's a first.
Really?
Never seen that before.
Well, that's good. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 2 items on our agenda.
This isn't one of that big, that we're 2 hours.
So, can I have a motion to treat items 2 and 3 together, or do we need a motion, or can they just...
I make a motion to treat 2 and 3 together on 256 Spruce Street.
On a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jacobson. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Public hearing on items 2 and 3, 256 Spruce Street, application of Attorney David Quattrella, trustee to amend the zoning map to establish a design commercial district on land presently zoned Residence B, and 256 Spruce Street, zoning compliance application of Attorney David Quattrella, trustee, for expanded off-street parking. Attorney Quattrella.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. For the record, my name is David Quattrella. I'm an attorney with Quattrella and Rizzio. Our offices are at 1 Post Road in Fairfield. In addition to being the attorney for the applicant, I am the applicant in my capacity as trustee for the companies that own two adjacent shopping centers which abut the subject premises at 256 Spruce Street. I believe you might remember that we were here back in February. We made basically the same presentation. At that time, a number of questions arose, and we elected by the commissioners, and we elected to withdraw our application in order to resubmit to provide additional information. So if you'll bear with me, a lot of the information I'm going to give you, you've already heard once before, but I need to establish this record. I am a trustee that purchased the property at 256 Spruce Street, which is in the Residence B district. The closing took place in February of this year. It's a small parcel of land, about 7,000 square feet in size. At the time we purchased the property, I purchased it as trustee on behalf of two LLCs. They are 3355 Post Road LLC and 3377 Post Road LLC. These are the two entities that own the two shopping centers that are on Post Road, which abut the rear yard of the property on Spruce Street. This is the shopping center where the Dunkin' Donuts is located, the Subway, the Tabbouleh Grill, and several other retail businesses, which is just off the exit 19, off of the southbound exit of the I-95. With me this evening are Michael Buterla, who's our engineer from the Huntington Company, also Garrett Bolella, who's our traffic engineer, who's prepared a parking study for us, and Michael Cusato, who's our architect. Also, I'd like to mention that two of the principals of the two companies that own the shopping center here as well, who are Michael Schinella and Donald Sherman, both of whom have their offices and residences here in the town of Fairfield. I'll be making a brief presentation. I'll be asking our engineers and our architect to also make brief presentations, and then we would all be available to answer questions. So again, to refresh your memory, and as stated in the application for amendment of zoning map and our statement of use, the intention here is to change the zone for the parcel of land, which is just over 7,000 square feet in size, which is in a Residence B district, and make it a design commercial district. That's the same district that the abutting shopping center is in. The reason for this request is because the shopping center is presently prior non-conforming with respect to the number of parking spaces that it has available for off-street parking. Under your regulations, the center would need 59 parking spaces. We have 53 parking spaces. I verified both with our engineer and with Mr. Wendt that 59 is the magic number that we would need to be conforming. A number of years ago, in 2004, my clients also purchased another piece of property on Spruce Street, which they also requested a change from your commission from Residence B to Design Commercial District for the very same reason we're doing this piece of property, which was to provide off-street parking. At that time and at the present time, a number of the employees at the center are parking on Spruce Street. Some of the customers are parking on Spruce Street because the parking lot does fill up at peak hours of service during the week and particularly on weekends. We have received complaints from at least one of the neighbors who, Mr. Romero, Douglas Romero, who was here at the last meeting. He's not here this evening, but he has given us a letter of support, which we've submitted a copy into the record, and I will submit the original tonight, requesting that the commission and the commissioners support the change of zone and adopt it. And the justification that he is requesting for that is the fact that he is hoping that this will enable the the employees and the customers that are, and the patrons of the center that are parking on Spruce Street to park on the center off-street parking spaces. The landlord is going to require this as a condition of all leases in the future at the center. The landlord is also going to encourage the tenants in the center to require their employees to park in the on-street, off-street parking spaces. The reason why they're not doing that now is because the tenants have been complaining to us that if their employees were parking in the parking spaces, the customers are complaining that there's no parking. And the tenants are concerned they're losing patrons because the center is hard to park in. So this is the background information which I presented the last time in February. The two questions that came up by the commissioners, to refresh your memory, was whether there is actually a need for additional off-street parking, or whether there's an abundance of vacant and available spaces at all times, at all hours, where there would be no need to change the zoning designation of this parcel on Spruce Street to make it part of the parking lot. At that time, we responded that yes, there is a serious need for additional parking. That was based on my own knowledge, and then Mr. Schinella came up and spoke too. He's owned this center now for 12 years. We did put that into the record. We also, one of the questions that was raised by the commissioners last time was whether if you agreed to convert change the zoning district from B residence to design commercial, whether that would enable the landlord to construct additional building space, retail space on the site. In other words, to enlarge the shopping center, to either build another building on there or to knock the buildings down that are there now and to, build a larger shopping center. Again, at that time, I testified and Mr. Schinella testified that, to our knowledge, that would not be possible. Mr. Schinella has been in the real estate development business for more than 30 years, and, he's very knowledgeable about Fairfield. He owns a lot of property in Fairfield and other surrounding towns. So again, we presented that evidence, but when the hearing closed and before it came to a vote, we met and we decided that rather than the commissioners just relying on the testimony of the attorney, the applicant, and Mr. Schinella, who you may not perceive to be experts in making that type of testimony and perhaps having some bias to answering that question, in a favorable manner, we decided that we would withdraw the application and engage the services of a traffic engineer to do a parking study and an architect to do a feasibility study on whether or not we would be able to actually construct more square footage on the shopping center site as a result of adding this 7,000 square feet or not. And in a moment, I will introduce those consultants who will give you the details of that. We have submitted the reports that were prepared by those engineers, and there are plans in the file that were part of the application, which is in front of you, but they will be here to walk you through that and to answer any questions you may have. And their conclusions are that there is a great need for additional off-street parking, and the conclusion also is they would not be able to put additional square footage on the site. In fact, they couldn't even replace the existing square footage and not eliminate the drive-through lane. So, going to just some background information before I introduce the consultants. This center is at 3355 Post Road and at 3377 Post Road. Presently, they're sharing parking spaces. For those of you who are familiar with the center, you'll note that there is parking on the westernmost side of the Dunkin' Donuts Subway building, which is also where there's a drive-through lane. There's a limited number of parking spaces on that side because of the drive-through lane. The people that are the patrons of the shopping center and the employees of the shopping center, which is at 3377 Post Road, which is where Vision Center Associates, Tabbouleh Grill, Toscano Pizzeria, and Blow Dry, which is a hairdressing salon, those four tenants have advised the landlord on many occasions that their patrons and their employees simply won't park on the western side of Dunkin' Donuts and subway because of the walk and the distance. That they're parking in the parking lot which is between the subway and that shopping center at 3377 Post Road. The patrons of Subway primarily park in that same parking lot. So those spaces in the middle are the ones that tend to get filled up the most, although the Dunkin' Donuts spaces do get filled up in the morning, which is the peak hours of operation for the Dunkin' Donuts, for any of you that may, stop there in the morning on the way to work. So the people that are parking on Spruce Street are primarily patrons and employees of the 3377 Post Road building, which is where Vision Center Associates Tabuli, Toscano, and Blow Dry are located. Now, the problem that's arisen recently on Spruce Street is because Center Street was turned into a one-way street approximately a year or so ago, there's more traffic also now on Spruce Street. And in the wintertime, when the snowplows come through, the people that park on that street are parking, not right up against the curb, and it's creating a narrow passway on Spruce Street, it's a two-way street still over there. So there's a traffic hazard that's been caused by the narrowness in the winter and the increased amount of traffic on the street. Mr. Romero, who owns his house and lives in it, by the way, he's the only owner-occupant on the street. The other four residential single-family dwellings are all rented. They're not owner-occupied, but he is familiar and friendly with those people. They all complain that they have a tough time now backing out in the street because of the increased traffic, but also because of the line of cars that basically parks there every day. So Mr. Romero, who has signed the letter, which I might as well submit into the record at this point, I'll keep referring to it, he has spoken to the neighbors, and they're of the same opinion, but they're tenants, and they didn't really want to sign a petition or really sign a letter endorsing the application. They weren't against it, and they weren't for it, and we don't have any letters from them, but we do have a letter from Douglas and Alicia Romero, and they own and reside at 279 Spruce Street in Southport. And on this letter of support, attached is an area map that shows highlighted in yellow their house in relation to the subject premises, which is at the center of the zone change map, and it's highlighted in black. And you'll see from this that they are diagonally across the street from the subject premises. I do have copies of the letter.
And over here, we'll pass it down.
I don't have a copy of the area map highlighted for those particular letters. That is the letter that I just submitted the original into the record.
Thank you.
Also on that street, since we're talking about people in support, Paulsa and Paulsa is an accounting firm that occupies premises at the end of the street, and their address is 230 Spruce Street. Now, this particular property is also in the Residence B zone, but it's been used for more than 50 years for commercial purposes. And it was not by means of a zone change, it was by means of a variance that was granted in 1961. And they are also supporting the zone change. And James Paulsa, has indicated in his letter, which I'll also give to you, which I could read into the record if you like, that his office faces this direction and faces the property, and he was happy to see that the house, which was formerly at 256 Spruce Street, which was in a serious state of disrepair, has been removed. And he also mentions about the, in his opinion, the clear need for additional parking at the shopping center and to get the cars off of Spruce Street. Yeah, I have copies of this as well. And I have a third letter of support, which was signed by Joseph Bertini, who owns several properties across the Post Road from the shopping center, one of which is at 3266 Post Road, which is the location of the Classic Car Gallery. And he too is indicating his support for the zone change. And On all of these letters, on the original of the letter which I'm submitting, I have an area map highlighting the letter writer's location of their property in relation to the subject premises, and I have additional copies. So now, to just describe the street, I don't know whether the commissioners have a chance to get out there or they're familiar with it, but the zone change map that was submitted with the application, I've taken the liberty of preparing an 11 by 17 version, and I've highlighted in yellow the properties that are shown on this map that are already in the design commercial district. And you'll see from the map that the majority of the properties within the 500-foot radius are in the design commercial district. And you'll see that the properties on Spruce Street are a mix of Residence B and the design commercial district. And as I said before, the subject premises at 256 Spruce Street is highlighted in black. It's in the dead center of the map. And the properties that surround the subject premises on the westerly, northerly, and northeasterly boundaries are all presently part of the shopping center where the Dunkin' Donuts, Subway, Tabbouleh Grill, and the other retail businesses are located. So what our proposal would result in would be the extension of the design commercial district to incorporate the 7,000 square feet of land. It's presently vacant land because we did knock down the deteriorated house. And incorporate it into the center and to provide for 18 additional on-site parking spaces. As I said before, the shopping center is presently prior non-conforming with respect to the number of on-site spaces for the present uses. The addition of these 18 parking spaces would take us from 53 spaces to 71 spaces, which would make us conforming and which would provide a surplus of spaces. That combined with the requirement that we're going to insist of our tenants that the employees not cease parking on Spruce Street will eliminate the parking issue on Spruce Street. It'll provide the additional on-site parking that is needed not just for the employees but for the patrons of the center. And our traffic consultant will explain his traffic count and why he feels that that's important that it be done. And will solve what we perceive to be a serious problem for the landlord and the landlord's tenants. And I would like to point out that the landlord is doing this both for the tenants of the center, for the patrons of the center, and for the neighbors, because we are trying to alleviate the street parking that's been occurring on Spruce Street. Of course, this benefits the landlord. It's obvious, if the center is attractive to patrons and they can park on site, the tenants will be successful, the tenants will pay the rent, and the tenants will stay there. We're 100% leased right now. There's no vacant space. That's pretty much been the situation since my clients purchased it. Some of you may remember this was the site of Arthur Treacher's for many years, which was embroiled in litigation with the prior owner and the Arthur Treacher's tenants for many, many years. It was vacant for many years. It was became an eyesore. My clients, as I said, purchased this in 2002 from the family that had been involved with the litigation with Arthur Treacher's. And since they've purchased it, you may or may not be aware, they've put a lot of money into the center. They've cleaned it up. They've improved it. They've made it a very attractive shopping center. It's very successful. And at the moment, it's a victim of its own success because there are that many patrons. This is why a parking issue has arisen. So they purchased this property. They spent a good amount of money doing that. They've spent a fair amount of money now in pursuing this approval. And it's really to improve the parking situation on site, which is one of the recommendations of your plan of conservation and development is to move traffic from street parking to off-street parking, and this will allow my clients to do that. You should know also that the remaining there's two vacant parcels that are still located on Spruce Street. I'm sorry, there's 2 parcels on Spruce Street which are in the Residence B district. One is the Paulsa and Paulsa accounting firm that I mentioned, which has been used, as I said, for 50 years based on a variance for commercial purposes. The lot between Paulsa and Paulsa and my client's property at 256 Spruce Street is a vacant lot that was purchased by People's United Bank, which does have a branch on Post Road at the corner of Post Road and Jolliffe Lane. They also own the property at the rear of their property that faces on Post Road.
Cutrella,
Yes,
did they purchase this, or was this in foreclosure?
they purchased it.
They purchased it.
Yeah, I can give you a little background on that.
Please.
There was a woman, Mrs. Adams, that lived in the house for many, many years. She was an elderly lady. She died. Her children tried for more than a year to sell the house, with the house on it, and they were unable to sell it. The complaint, it was relayed to me, was primarily not just the condition of the house and the amount of money that would be needed to fix it up, but the fact that it abutted the shopping center and commercial uses on the Post Road. And the family then approached my client to see if they'd be willing to buy it, and my clients did agree to buy it. The property that People's United Bank owns, my understanding is it's been on the market for at least 2, if not 3 years, and they've been unable to sell it. And again, indirectly, I've been told by the broker that had the listing that the problem is with those lots those 2 lots on the north side of Spruce Street, is that because they back up to the commercial uses, it's a difficult sell to try to sell for somebody to use for residential purposes. My client purchased it, no contingencies, with the intention to put a parking lot on there. There's absolutely no intention and actually no ability to enlarge the size of the shopping center as a result of adding this property to the center, should this commission agree to the zone change. Because it is a prior non-conforming center, all we're doing is making it conforming. We're not we're not adding enough additional space there to enlarge the center.
I mean, not to sort of poke the argument, but you could keep it as a separate lot. You don't have to make it part of the center. And if you were to keep the lot separate, and it was, the zone change, you could put a separate building with separate parking on that lot.
No, what we would be doing, the reason why I took title as trustee was because our intention, and in the plans you'll see, our intention is to divide the lot in half.
Yep.
And do a lot line revision and merger, and merge half of the lot, approximately 3,500 square feet, into the shopping center where the Tabbouleh Grill is at 3377 Post Road, which is also at 280 Spruce Street, and the other half would be merged into the Dunkin' Donuts property at 3355 Post Road. So there, and also, even if we were not to do that, the building would be so tiny, it would have no frontage on Post Road. It would make no economic sense to do it. And we would certainly be willing to make that a condition of the approval, that we would merge it, yeah.
So, and that was one of the things I was going to ask you at some point, was to explain why, while it's, one lot presently, and on the map and so forth, on your site plan, you've got it, divided into 2 different LLCs, and the plan is then to divide and merge them into the respective centers.
There's already, there's 2, Mr. Chairman, there's 2 separate tax parcels, 2 separate shopping centers, 2 separate entities that own these, and they have since 2002.
Right.
So the entity that owns the property where the Dunkin' Donuts is known as 3355 Post Road LLC.
Yeah.
Separate entity. The property at the corner of Spruce and Post Road, which is where Tabbouleh Grill is, that's 3377 Post Road LLC.
And so given the size of the building at 3377 and the size of the parcel to be deeded, your configuration of parking would be in compliance with the regulations, but would at the same time not provide space to expand the commercial business.
Correct, correct.
And the same is true with respect to 3355?
Yes, correct. That's correct. Yeah. And the other thing that the commission should be aware of is that we have a drive-through lane for the Dunkin' Donuts, and we would never be able to replace that if these buildings were to be taken down. The only reason why that was capable of being done was because of the prior non-conforming nature of these two shopping centers. So. What I'd like to do now is to have Mike Baturla come up from Huntington Company and walk you through the site plan, since we're talking about the site plan a bit. And after that, he'll make a brief presentation, then I would have our traffic engineer speak briefly, and our architect, and just to, back up what I've told you now, as a matter of summary. So,
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, my name is Michael Baturla. I'm a licensed land surveyor and professional engineer here in Connecticut, also a member of the Huntington Company with an office in Fairfield. As Attorney Cretella says, this particular lot at 256 Spruce Street is just over 7,000 square feet in size. What we propose to do is to pave and create a new parking lot, which will give us 18 additional parking spaces. Again, as the attorney said, there are presently 53. The extra 18 will give us a grand total of 71. Because we're introducing more pavement on the property, I've got a stormwater retention system designed. I chose to use a 4-foot high concrete galleys. I investigated storms from a 2-year storm to a 100-year storm, and I have adequate retention. The design was reviewed by the engineering department, Laura Pooley, in fact, and she's in agreement with the design proposed. From last submittal, there were a couple, 2-3 meetings that we had with her, some of her minor concerns, and which we incorporated in the plan. She wanted a bigger green buffer between us and the bank property, which we provided. Also, some notation on the shoulder area of Spruce Street. Again, what she requested in the past emails, we've satisfied. I think the last submittal we had the lane in between the parking at 25 feet. Beg your pardon, I think we had it at 29 feet. It's now 25 feet. We lessened that, and that was because of our concern to get more green area. I think Laura's latest email to P&Z, which was dated today, and she mentioned that this plan before you today reflects all her concerns that she had on previous emails. Questions?
Thank you.
if I could just add one thing to what Mike just mentioned, is that one of the things we're doing, and this is, was at the request of the neighbors, and it makes perfect sense, we'd have done it anyway, is we're eliminating the curb cuts, the curb cut for the driveway at 256 Spruce Street.
There's no access.
There will be no access from Spruce Street. That was important to the neighbors.
Yep.
It's actually important to us. We want to control traffic. It can only access these 18 new spaces from the post road. And what we're going to do here, and it's shown on the plan, is there's an existing 6-foot boxwood hedge that has cuts for where the walkway used to be in the driveway. We're going to retain the 6-foot boxwood hedge, and we're going to fill it in with other 6-foot hedging, so there'll be the full hedging there. And we're also going to put in the same 6-foot high white vinyl fence that presently exists along 280 Spruce Street. We're going to continue that down along the frontage of 256 Spruce Street. So there'll be both the white fence, and in front of the white fence, we'll have the hedges. So we'll have both the landscaping and the fencing to screen this from the residential properties on the south side of Spruce Street.
And there's sidewalk there, right?
There is a sidewalk there, yes.
And
Oh,
that-
wait, Mike, is there? Oh, yeah, I want to misspeak here.
No, there's no sidewalk on the Spruce.
There's sidewalk on the other side of the street? Yeah. I know there's, I mean, I know there's sidewalk on Spruce Street at some point because I drive it.
All right. My client has just informed me that there is a sidewalk on the opposite side of the street, but not on the southerly side, but not on the northerly side. There was a walkway that used to come from the house out to the street, but that's been removed as part of the demolition. But the point is that this property is going to not be accessible in any manner, both either pedestrian or vehicular, from Spruce Street. It would only be accessed from the shopping center by means of the Post Road.
Would that also be a condition of approval?
That would be no problem, yes. That was actually a condition of approval when the zone change was granted for 280 Spruce Street 10 years ago, I guess. Yeah. So that application was nearly identical to this one, at the time. And the neighbors were initially opposed, and then they supported it once we agreed there would never be access, curb cut access from Spruce Street. I'd like to introduce Garrett Bolello, who's our traffic consultant, and we engaged him since the February meeting, basically to address the concern that the commissioners expressed at that time and this evening about whether or not there's a need for off-street parking. So Garrett, you come up.
Good evening. Garrett Bolello, Associate Transportation with Frederick P. Clark Associates. We conducted the traffic or parking evaluation for 3377 and 3355 Post Road. Just to reiterate, the applicant has a desire to provide the appropriate number of parking spots so that the patrons and the customers can have better access to the proposed facility. As you can see here, there's two freestanding buildings on the properties. You can see 3355 Post Road. It currently contains a Subway and Dunkin' Donuts, and then 3377, which has the Tabooey Grill, the Tuscany Pizzeria, Blow Dry, and a Vision Center. They both have access to Post Road. You can see Post Road right up here, and Spruce Street down here. And they currently have no access, and there's no planned access in the future. The parking, or our proposed parking location, is shown right here, and you can see the existing single-family home that has been raised is no longer there. Right. In the future, we propose access through this parking lot to Post Road. Just to give you an idea of the parking capacity on the existing site, you can see here, east of Dunkin' Donuts, you have about 22 spots, which serve the Dunkin' Donuts and the Subway. To the west of that building, you have another parking lot which primarily serves that building with 10 spots. To the east of 3377, which has the pizzeria, the grill, the blow dry, and the Vision Center, you have two parking lots, one with 9 spaces and then one with 12 spaces. That totals for 53 parking spots on site. There's also 11 parking spots which are part of Post Road, part of the street, totaling a capacity of 64. But again, only 53 parking spots on site, which does not comply with current town parking requirements, which is 59 parking spaces. What we spoke about is the Spruce Street parking and where we want to get vehicles off of. Right, Spruce Street is right here, and you can see behind 3377 along the fence and the bushes is where people are currently parking. So what we did is we conduct a parking demand study, and we conducted it on 2 of the busier days of the week. So we went out and did counts on a Friday and Saturday during April, which is a busier month, and as the volumes slowly peak or decrease in the summertime months. We conducted the actual counts on April 25th. That was a Friday, and then the following day, April 26th.
Right. What we found is shown in figure 2, is that the parking demand exceeded the parking capacity. And we use a conservative estimate of those 64 spots. The parking demand is shown in green right here, and you can see the parking capacity, which is 64 vehicles. So for example, for the Friday morning peak hour, you see that the demand exceeds the capacity for several time periods. And not only does it exceed the capacity, the parking areas reach a capacity of 116%. So you might think, why is that possible? That's possible because the entire parking lot might not have all the lots on site might not have every spot filled, but there will be several vehicles parking down Spruce Street, whether they are employees or patrons. This suggests, right, a peak demand period, which occurred at 9 a.m. on a Friday morning, suggests that we need at least or a minimum of 10 spots to accommodate all those vehicles and get them off of Spruce Street. You see a similar condition for the Saturday morning period, almost identical peak parking demand, same capacity, and still a need for 10 parking spaces. And we conducted counts for the morning, the midday period, and the afternoon, and I will show you next. For Friday and Saturday midday, a similar situation. This time we have the peak parking demand exceeding capacity for all time periods. You can see that slightly higher peak parking demand, which requires a couple more spaces to accommodate the vehicles. And we see a very, very similar trend, albeit later in the day on Saturday afternoon. And then for the afternoon, late evening, we see similar results. You can see that the parking demand is still greater than the parking capacity for many time periods. And again, it requires at least 7 spaces. In the evening, it's a little bit quieter, and at least 9 spaces during the evening on Saturday. Just to mention, it's very important that we get the vehicles off of Spruce Street, as since Center Street has become a one-way street. Spruce Street has increased in traffic volume. And again, in the winter time, we have problems with vehicles parking on the roadway and narrowing the actual width of the roadway so that vehicles can pass safely or back out of the adjacent drives. And the south side of Spruce Street does currently contain residential units, and we want to make an environment safe for them. In conclusion, this is very warranted based on the traffic demand relative to the capacity. For almost all time periods on the busier days of the week. This project will allow a non-conforming lot to become a conforming lot, and we feel it's a no-brainer. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to reiterate, out of what Garrett just presented was that although we have 53 spaces and your regulations require 59, which would only be 6 additional parking spaces, their traffic counts that they actually did show that at times they needed 10. So
10 more.
10 additional spaces, right. So we're going to provide 18, which is, a surplus above that. So we're confident at this point that by being able to get the zone change and adding this additional land for the 18 parking spaces, this is going to fulfill the need that the center has. And this should eliminate the people parking on Spruce Street, which is, a big concern of my clients, because they are trying to be good neighbors with the residences on Spruce Street. So the last consultant I'd like to introduce now is Mike Casado, who's our architect. Again, we hired Mike not to design the parking lot, but to do a feasibility study to determine whether there's any way we could squeeze additional square footage, either by enlarging the existing buildings or by knocking them down and building an entirely new building. And that's the mission he was charged with, and his conclusion was that we can't, and I'll let him tell you that himself in his own words and explain it.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission. Michael Casado, Registered Architect, Connecticut 11088. I'm here to chat with you this evening about the feasibility study that Attorney Quattrella just enumerated. What we wanted to start with was just a basic math equation and take a look at what we have existing in square footage of the building, plus what we have in number of parking spaces required, and see if we could find an additional usage to the site or a more efficient usage to the site to squeeze this out and make this happen. So that was what I was tasked with. So starting with a complete greenfield site, hypothetical, including our lot on Spruce Street that would be part of this greenfield site, I took the existing square footage of the two buildings that are at 3377 and 3355, which amount to 7,930 square feet. I take this number, arbitrarily look at the site and say, where can I put 7,900 square feet on this site that make any kind of sense? As you know, it's a very odd-shaped site. So once I take that, and I take the site and the property lines, which are the outer darker line, then obviously we have to use our current zoning setbacks that we're going to be using on this new greenfield site, which in this zone is going to be the 25-foot front and 10-foot side and rear. So what that does is that gives me a secondary buildable area on this site. So then once I do that, I have an obvious place where I'm going to be able to put 7,900 square feet. It's going to either be in this spot or it's going to be in this spot. And then I have to try to use the rest for parking, because we need to try to be economical with our building. We need to not try to spread it all over the place, because we're not going to be able to have a good parking layout after this. Is this okay? Should this work here?
There you go.
Okay, so then next I say, well, once we put our buildings in the most logical buildable area, then we have to lay out the parking per our Town of Fairfield zoning requirements. And we have now also a parking setback, as you know, on this zone is 10-foot front lot and 0 rear and side. So that leaves us with another, call it buildable area for a parking lot. Once I go ahead and I take care of the parking layouts in here, and I find it's exactly the same square footage for both of these buildings, I can only get 52 spots in one scenario and 53 in another scenario. It's not even close to, when right now we have 53. So I couldn't, even going to a greenfield site, I could not get one single more parking space, including, this is including the lot at 256 Spruce. So there's no possible way that you could take and increase the size of these buildings or start with a greenfield site and have a compliant lot. So it's my professional recommendation that the only way that they can get compliance is to do the surface lot and augment the two current buildings that are there.
Commissioner Barron.
I was going to say, that's because the current buildings aren't fully compliant. Your scenario implies compliant with all current regulations
Correct.
now.
Correct.
On this greenfield site.
Correct.
So, and it includes 256, you're saying.
Correct.
Given all that, to lay it out, you could not build a 7,900 square foot
Correct.
building and have the parking.
So including 256 Spruce,
Including
you
256.
couldn't even get what they have now in rentable square footage.
Is the building that you proposed a single story?
Yes. Yeah, well, that's the 7,900 square foot footprint of rentable area.
Right, for a single.
Correct, single
yeah.
story.
I think all the tenants now are single-story tenants because they're restaurant and hair salon.
Yeah, that's correct. And if we were going to try to propose a two-story building, we'd have a big parking issue.
Right,
So,
right.
so it's not feasible to do a two-story building there.
So I'm trying to, is it that the buildings now are non-compliant?
They're non-conforming, they're probably
Not non-conforming?
Yeah, we're not complying with all the setbacks. These
Setbacks.
buildings are, yeah, the setbacks is the issue. See, and in that building that he's showing, the 7,900 square foot building, or close to, it wouldn't have a drive-through either.
Right.
So we have 7,900 rentable square feet now with a drive-through. It's the best of both worlds. We couldn't duplicate it unless we got a million variances, which we would never get.
Thank you.
That's the end of my consultants. If you have other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
No.
Otherwise, I'll just respectfully request that you grant the zone change requested, and in conjunction with that, the grant of the zoning compliance for the park.
Very good.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
And allowing us to present this a second time.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public that wish to be heard on this application? Thank you. Just come up and state your name and address for the record.
Sure.
My name is Ann McGrath. I live at 26 Spruce Street, and I'm representing the Spruce Street Historic District, which is a sort of an informal gathering of neighbors in the area who are concerned about issues in our neighborhood. So I'd just like to read a letter, and I have copies of the letter.
Just hand it in there. Thank you.
August 12th, 2014, to the Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission. Proposed zone change for 256 Spruce Street. Fairfield's 2000 Town Plan of Conservation and Development opposes the encroachment of commercial zones into residential areas of Southport. And I'm quoting from the plan. Southport is almost a town within a town with a wide range of diverse activities and land users. The integrity of Southport should be maintained by continuing commercial uses of a neighborhood scale and residential mixed uses. Encroachment of commercial zones into residential areas should be discouraged. Therefore, we oppose the application of David Quattrella to amend the zoning map to establish a designed commercial district on land presently zoned Residence B. Respectfully submitted, the undersigned neighbors, Spruce Street Historic District. There are 23 names here. May I read them, or shall I not read them? Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Are these renters or these owners?
These are owners at 26, on Spruce Street South.
So the names listed here are the people that own at these addresses?
Yeah, the primary reason that we're here tonight is to discuss 172 John Street, which is around the corner from Spruce Street South. Nevertheless, we want to express, for the record, our consistent view that we should stop commercial encroachment in residential zones, and therefore wanted to submit a point of view on this application.
Okay. And, I'm sorry, is your name is just listed
My
here?
name is Ann McGrath.
And
It's
the first one, thank you. This doesn't need to be signed or anything like that, right? It's just a, right, okay, all right. Very good, that's Commissioner Barrett.
Thank you.
Ms. McGrath, we got a
Yes.
letter, I know we got email letters from you today, I believe, on John
Correct.
Street.
That's
I
correct.
just ask, on this Spruce Street, because I'm not familiar with all the house numbers on Spruce Street.
Yep.
The people that signed this, there's this Spruce Street that's separated by Jelliff, and then there's the other Spruce Street.
Correct.
Across, on the other side of the Connecticut Turnpike. Do all these people live on the other side of the Connecticut Turnpike, or any of them lot owners
To the
on
best
this
of my
portion?
knowledge, those two sections are usually referred to as Spruce Street South
Yeah.
and Spruce Street North. The subject property for this application is 256 Spruce Street North. All of these residences and owners are on Spruce Street South.
Okay, thank you.
And did you talk to all of these folks?
Yes.
Thank you.
We've had many conversations. Thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to be heard on this?
Good evening. My name is George Russell. I'm the president of the Sasquatch Association, the Southport Neighborhood Association. And, we considered this application, and our board is concerned, like the residents of the Spruce Street Historic District, about the encroachment of the commercial development into this residential area. The mixed use is a part of the character of this part of town, and we feel it should be maintained. And we see a pattern here where slowly these properties are being changed from residential to commercial, and it's really changing the nature of the area. And just listening to what the attorney said tonight, a couple points I would make is that, I don't think the additional parking is going to do anything to stop people from parking on Spruce Street. That's still going to be an ongoing problem. There's got to be some other solution for that, but I don't think it's going to stop anything. And in addition, I just think that, like they were saying, that the People's Bank lot is difficult to sell because of the commercial nature of the things going around there. So when you put a parking lot next to it, it's going to make it even less attractive for someone to buy. And then it'll make it easier for these developers to buy it for a better price. And then before you know it, who knows what could go in there. So I would ask that you would please deny this request. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to be heard? No? All right. Attorney Quattrella, any rebuttal?
Yeah, just a brief rebuttal. I understand the concerns, and I understand, and I'm familiar with the section of the POCD quoting. I think the distinction here on this particular application is that our Spruce Street, whether you call it Spruce Street North or just Spruce Street, there's already a number of design commercial district zone properties, including a large commercial office building at the corner of Jelliff and Spruce. And the other distinction is that the neighbors want this. They're trying to find a way to help us to get our people off the street. We can make it a condition of our leases now that you have to park in the parking lot, but that's only going to exacerbate what's already a parking problem that we have at our peak hours of operation. We can't just make the requirement that everybody that works there park in the parking lot unless there's enough spaces. So our idea here is to create more spaces so that we can do that. And I'd like to point out, the landlord doesn't gain a lot from this. They don't get higher rent. They don't make more money. All they're doing is satisfying, what's been a request of the tenants, who are getting requests from the patrons and complaints from the neighbors. So this is really an effort to improve what is a bad situation. I think this is an entirely different stretch of Spruce Street than the area that the petitioners are complaining about and are quoting that section of the POCD. So I don't think this is an encroachment. We're already there, and it's been many, many years. This is not like something that's been just happening in the last 10 years. So I'd respectfully request again that you see fit to grant our zone change.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'll close the public hearing on that item, on those two items. Next item on our agenda is 172 John Street, application of 927 Group LLC to establish a design commercial district on land presently zoned Residence B. A motion to take 4 and 5 together?
Make a motion, here 4 and 5 together.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Alessi, second by Commissioner Jacobs, to take 4 and 5, 172 John Street together. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? Carries unanimously. Attorney Fowler.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is John Fallon, and I am here representing the applicants on these combined applications. That is 927 Group LLC. The members of 927 Group LLC are Fred and Priscilla Lord, who are seated in the front row. The property is currently zoned Residence B. There seems to be some question that we will research in terms of the exact date that zone change was previously made, but I can certainly tell you it was, because I think I did it. The property owner at the time who was living in the residence, and the residence was a pre-existing non-conforming use, i.e. a residential property in the commercial district, determined that he wanted to change the zone of the property, and that was done. However, prior to that time, and for many, many years prior to that time, the property had been zoned in the design commercial district, as is much of the surrounding neighborhood. Mike, could I have the zone map, please? Thanks. This is obviously already part of your record, but for illustrative purposes, I wanted to have it here in front of you. As you can see, the property here in this area to the east is in the design industrial district. The dark shade here is the design commercial district. This is obviously the Metro North Railroad directly across the street from us. And then you have the Residence B zone substantially here, and on the other side of the railroad, the Residence A zone. And of course, we are zoned now as Residence B. I want to say a few words about. Do you have a question?
Commissioner Barrett, it should be simple.
Yeah, it's a simple question. I don't, not to destroy the flow. Just
What flow?
I just want to.
I have no flow.
I'm just getting
All I want to know is for you to assert what the date of the zone change.
I'm not, and I saw the,
The letter says 5 years ago.
yeah, I don't know, that was my recollection, that's what I thought. I looked at some records, I could have been wrong, I saw there was reference in some material you got to 1995. Obviously, staff will make that
Older than you think.
clear for you. Yeah, time flies. Time flies when you're having fun.
It was 1995. I would just like to see that clarified, because if you say 5 years ago, at some point in time, some commission would have made a determination that time, experience, and reasonable plan dictated need for
And that,
zoning for
and
residents.
Mr. Wen says that was
And
1995, so.
if that was done
we
5 years
don't
ago,
dispute
that's
that. And there was
19.
probably a lot of brilliant advocacy involved at the time as well.
You only wish you could remember it.
Yeah. Put it on my mind. But I want to say a couple of words before I go on about Fred and Priscilla, without embarrassing them. They've resided in Southport Village for 13 years. They have a great love for the village. The business, which I'll talk about a little bit later, that they operate is currently located at 136 John Street. So they have a great deal of commitment and affection. I am familiar with this property, and I think that it's important, as I share it with you, that we take into consideration here early on in these proceedings its residential history. Although it was zoned for many years in the design commercial district, it did have use as a residence, and that was not always very easy. If you were down there, as I know you were in your diligence, this property sits 16 feet, if that's the length of the road, from the railroad tracks. And I want to provide you with some photographs that we took. The ones on top are the after photographs, but I do commend you to I do commend you to the second page, because when Fred and Priscilla purchased this property, and let me say they purchased it, they knew that they were purchasing it as residentially zoned property, there's no doubt about that, but they also knew where its location was in regards to the other commercial properties in the area, where it was in conjunction with the railroad station and the railroad tracks directly across the street. But either way, they made a commitment to refurbish and restore that property, which I can tell you had fallen into, I don't know if there were actually squatters there, I think there may have been, I sure saw some rats. It was not in good condition. And I think in terms of, and we'll talk about this in the course of the hearing, the matters that you need to look at in terms of a zone change, you do have to take into consideration the viability of this property, located as it is for residential use. And I think that's why for so long it was zoned commercial, and I don't think, notwithstanding the desire of the then residential property owner to change the zone back, in any way you can't look at this property in 2014 and make the kind of determinations based upon the standards we'll talk about a little later. The specific applications are clear. We're seeking a change of zone to restore the original design commercial district status. As shown on the site plan and the architectural plans that we've presented as part of the application, the second application, we're seeking to construct first and second floor additions to the existing building to be used for the office use that I'll talk about. The total addition is a modest 938 square feet. We are providing parking areas in total compliance with the regulations. We never sought any parking variances. We have 20 parking spaces on site, and they will fit the needs very handily of our occupant, Blue Sea Studio, that I'll talk about in a moment. Now, what about Blue Sea Studio? I think that is important here, because Fred and Priscilla are here for the long haul. They've lived here for 13 years, they've operated this business down the street for 13 years in a rental capacity. They want to own. They want to be part of the business fabric with an ownership interest. Blue Sea Studio, and I think you'll hear from some of their employees during the course of the proceedings tonight, is a creative communications company specializing in custom health training and communication strategy. What they do is they develop creative communication delivered from a full spectrum of digital and traditional media for clients in the healthcare and health training field. Their employees, who number 8, predominantly work in what they refer to as the virtual realm, and most of those employees work from home most of the time. Indeed, the property is directly across the street from a railroad station as well, which I think is pertinent to the considerations of convenience and traffic, which we'll talk about tonight. Since their clients comprise large and national, international companies, we don't get any client traffic or contact in the office. When a client has to be met face-to-face, representatives of Blue Sea go to them. And as I said, the company has established a very unobtrusive presence at 136 John Street for a very prolonged period of time, directly in the neighborhood that we're talking about, down the street. The Zoning Board of Appeals approved a variance of this application unanimously on February 6, 2014. All notice is required under the statute, and the regulations of the ZBA was given. Everyone within 200 feet got a letter from the zoning department. The variance was very technical in nature. It was section 12.7.6.1 with regard to the street line setback, as it related to the existing house and the covered porch, which you see in the picture. There was no change to the setback. What it was that although the setback of the building complied with the setback, the street setback for the residential zone, it would not comply with the setback for the commercial zone should you change the regulation. So after consulting with staff, it was determined we should see the variance, I suppose, on a contingent basis. But I want to emphasize that the variance did not require any change in the physical location of the structure. The only reason we went for the variance was because in this district, if you change the zone, the house is not compliant with the setback. In the residential zone, it is. And that's why we went there.
So once we changed were we to grant the application for the zone change?
There'd be a variance in place to legitimize the location of the house.
Which you already have.
Which we already have. In terms of how we sequenced that, we talked about it, we determined that the proper approach was to go to ZBA first. Okay? We also sought a
Commissioner Melissa,
certificate.
you have a question on that?
I have a question going back to your earlier point. 8
Mm-hmm.
employees, not all of them work at the...
Generally, the 8 employees generally work more at home than they do in the office, and they don't see customers in the office. When they have to see a customer face-to-face, they go there. They will come to the office from time to time, but generally speaking, and you'll hear from some of them, they work virtually, if you will. They work by computer, they work from home.
And the need for the modest addition is?
Basically, just to deal with the needs of the employees, the employees, and also. Yes, we're going to have.
All right.
We'll have our architect address
Okay.
that. I know it's
Great.
not though staff driven, but Emmanuel will talk about that in a second. The other thing that's pertinent here, more than just checking boxes, is we had to go through a process of getting a certificate of wetlands conformance. And Bill Kenny's here, and you'll hear from him tonight or at some point, and talk to you about the very detailed planting plan that we put in place here under the direction of Mr. Stanky and Ms. Jacobson, a real aesthetic and environmental enhancement to the property. And you also have in your packet, we made a presentation to the Economic Development Commission. I've made copies, but I think you all have that letter from Mr. Barnhart. I won't read it in total, but I will hit their 3 major points. The parcel in question was formerly zoned for commercial use, and converting it back to commercial use would be consistent with the historical zoning of the property. The proposed addition is relatively modest in scale and would be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and adjoining uses, and the proposed development represents a significant investment in the community and would otherwise contribute positively to the community. The Commission respectfully asks that you consider these factors in your deliberations. So we're pleased to have that. There also was a code enforcement review, which is part of your record, that was conducted on April 29, 2014, and I know that's in the record, and we can discuss that at any point that it's pertinent. Is that a whistle?
I have somebody's sneaker.
Oh, okay. I thought somebody was going.
No. Although, I Honestly, I just looked up the clock.
I know.
cannot
Let me give
believe
you a little, I think, we're glad we got started. We know how busy this commission has been with other matters over the last few months, and so it's very good that, we're here. We probably do have a presentation that's going to take a little time, although we'll try to keep it focused. I have Mike Petula and Bill Kenny here, who will discuss the site plan, the landscaping plan, and the regulated area enhancements. Emmanuel Machado is here, who's our architect. He'll discuss the interior floor plan and what we're doing. Garrett Bolello is here, who you heard from. Where's Garrett? There he is. He is going to overview the traffic report and the traffic analysis that we did, and then I have some summary comments. And I know that a lot of members of the public want to talk, so whatever your pleasure.
I know. You're not going to be done in 10 minutes.
No, I think probably, and again, keeping it focused, I think we'd be a half an hour without questions.
So, the question is, do you want to get started for 10 minutes or just want a break?
I probably, for the continuity of the presentation, and would rather come in, finish up, no more me talking, just put the consultants on and go from there. Probably be better for the public too, because everything will be fresh.
No, that's why I'm asking. Members of the public, I'm terribly sorry, but we are going to continue this meeting. Our curfew is 11 o'clock. We got 10 minutes left. It makes more sense to have them put on the full presentation. This will be the first item on our next hearing, right? 2 weeks. With that, yeah.
Well, we have an extension, we needed an extension to get us to tonight, because of obvious scheduling issues that we've had for hearings.
We need an extension from them.
We have it. That extension carries us to the 30th of this month, but in light of the fact that we didn't conclude this matter and we've got other things queued up, we have a choice of, I guess, hearing this, rescheduling it to the next meeting, or 11:50, or denying it without prejudice and having them resubmit and start a new clock.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I'm terribly sorry, everyone, but we do have some cleanup procedurally that we do need to do, and the mics are all on. So, you're welcome to stay and listen, but just please try to whisper.
Or not.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone.
So the question at hand is...
No, they didn't show up,
Right.
right? Which gives us a means to deny it without prejudice, because their attendance is required at a public
Correct.
hearing.
Correct.
The matter does require a public hearing because
Correct.
it's a special permit application.
Correct.
And we can act on it tonight
Correct.
because we've got a few minutes left, and staff recommends that we do so.
For no other reason,
It just starts a fresh clock, so
Motion to go
we're not
back into
obligated to hear them at the very next
Motion to go
meeting.
back into executive session.
Second, motion made by Commissioner Alessi, seconded by Commissioner Jacobson to go back into executive session. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We're back in executive session. Can I have a motion on 1150 Post Road? Motion, Commissioner
I
Alessi,
make a motion to deny without prejudice.
for their failure to
For their
appear.
failure to appear tonight at their public hearing.
Okay. Motion made by Commissioner Alessi, deny without prejudice. Second by Commissioner Corcoran. Any discussion? No? Appearance is required under our regulations at a public hearing. A public hearing is required on a special permit application, and therefore, I think it's appropriate that we deny it without prejudice. Let them make another application, and we'll reschedule it. All right? Any further discussion? Nope. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? And the motion passes unanimously. All right? No further business. The meeting is adjourned.
Maybe just save that 10 minutes.